Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Naruto Had a Chaotic Harem, Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Before long, the group encountered Temari, who was walking leisurely toward her home in Sunagaku. The group was back on course towards Suna at a fast but controlled pace so as not to exhaust themselves too soon after Naruto jumped down to greet her and promptly informed her of what had happened. Reaching Suna only to be too exhausted to be of any use to anyone when they got there wouldn't do the trick, after all. As they continued their pace, Temari couldn't resist asking a question while looking around at all of Naruto's friends. "So, Naruto, who are your companions? The only person I recognize is Kakashi-san. I don't even see Sakura anywhere. I thought for sure she'd be with you. Didn't you used to have a really big crush on her?" she inquired with curiosity. Now, Naruto shook his head and sighed, glancing out of the corner of his eye at his friend. He said gravely, "Temari, I've changed. A lot has changed over the past 3 years. I can't discuss the details in depth, but suffice it to say, I've developed some interesting powers, and as a result of said powers, I met these wonderful women you see here with us. Their names are Riku, Meru, Tawa, Yang Xiaolong, and Blake Belladonna. My new team captain is Yamato. I am no longer part of Team Kakashi. He was assigned to the team temporarily due to his summons ability to track down the people that took your brother," Naruto clarified. As he continued to hop from tree to tree, he closed his eyes for a brief moment, inhaled deeply, let it out slowly, and then opened them again. "As for Sakura, I still care for her. But I turned her down when I returned to the village because at the time I was in a relationship with Riku and I wanted to stay loyal to her. Then I was called into a council meeting and slapped with the CRA, and now I don't know. I'm with these lovely women now, and I haven't talked with them about it yet. Sakura used to abuse me every chance she got, but I still have feelings for her. They never went away. Yeah, I moved on from her and became happy with Riku-chan and the others here with me now. But I never stopped caring for Sakura-chan. How could I?" Naruto looked glum. His face conveyed his sense of guilt. Before anyone else could respond, Riku leapt up beside her boyfriend and, as they continued to hop from tree to tree, put a reassuring hand on his shoulder and gave it a light squeeze. "Sweetie, why didn't you say anything sooner? We could have talked about this between all of us. If you truly care about her still, we could talk to her for you and see what her true intentions are. If she truly wants to make amends and be with you in a romantic light and has no intentions of abusing you again, then I think we would be okay with that. But it's something we'd have to communicate with each other about to be completely sure about. Sakura was never that great of a person to you after all, so it's only right for us to be worried about you when it comes to her. Even though the Sakura we met before seemed to be a truly changed individual, we can't be too sure. She might still be a meanie pants," Riku said with a cute grin. Naruto laughed at this, leaned in, kissed his fiancée tenderly, and gave her a comforting smile. "I love you, Riku-chan, and I always will. If you and the others say that you don't approve of Sakura joining our relationship, then I won't approach her about it. I want us all to be in agreement about it before we allow anyone to join our family. I just want all of us to be happy together," he said with a broad grin. Grinning at this, Temari leapt up next to Naruto on the opposite side and put a soft hand on his shoulder. With a raised eyebrow and an eager expression in her eyes, she said, "I'm glad you've found happiness, Naruto. You deserve it, you and my brother both. I do hope you'll be inviting us to your wedding when the time comes." Naruto nodded, chuckled softly, and put an arm around Temari. As he sped up once more, his friends and family groaned as they tried to keep up with him. "Of course, Temari-chan, I wouldn't dare think about leaving you three out of it. Now, what do you say we hurry up and get to Suna so we can save Kankuro and then go rescue Gaara, he suggested, wearing a broad smile. Kakashi, meanwhile, was only able to observe and hear the discussions going on in front of him from the rear. "Naruto, you've come a long way. I feel like I've let you down in a lot of ways. I simply wasn't there when I should have been there to help you. I'm hoping I can somehow make it up to you. I do. You've achieved great success for yourself, and you've even fallen in love with 5 stunning women. If I still have the right to call you that, I must say that I'm a little jealous of you, my pupil. Additionally, I'm happy that you are at least open to Sakura returning to your life. If you have time, I hope you'll let me back in as well." Tsunade Hospital 5 hours later. As they entered the hospital room where Kankuro lay in critical condition, the group became irate. Due to a blasted sandstorm, they had to wait out the couple of hours that they were supposed to arrive. Meru had stated that she could have used her magic to dispel it if it hadn't been such a massive sandstorm, but sadly, it was raging too fiercely for her to take any action. As previously stated, their only option was to wait it out. Nevertheless, they were there, and Riku was now examining Kankuro from above and doing her best to analyze him. He really did appear to be near death. With a frown, she hurriedly put on her white mage dress sphere and, with one hand, raised her staff while using the other to hover it over his body. She focused for a moment, then exclaimed, "Isuna." In a matter of seconds, Kankuro's skin tone returned to normal and his complexion brightened. His body relaxed and his perspiration stopped. He appeared to be back to normal and was no longer in any pain. Temari was astounded by how simple this process was for the girl next to her. As she looked into her eyes, she was overcome with awe. She was strong. The Suna Kunoichi buried her face in the bend of Riku's neck and embraced her before she could say anything. "Thank you. Thank you for saving my idiot brother. That was amazing. I don't know how you did that, but, thank you." Riku just put her arms around Temari and grinned at her while giggling a little. "Ah, it was no problem, Temari. It was just a simple magic spell. Didn't even take anything out of me. All I gotta do is concentrate a little and presto blammo, you're cured." "Pretty cool, huh," she said as she laughed. "Still, as long as I can help people out, I'm all for it. Now, we should probably let him rest for a bit," she said. "Once he wakes up, we should ask him if he has any idea which direction those goons left in, because right now we don't have any leads." "Unfortunately," Riku grumbled. Temari let out a sigh and opened her mouth to agree when they heard a disturbance coming from the hallway. As they hurried out of the room, Blake and Yang were shocked to see an elderly woman assaulting Kakashi while yelling something about the White Fang. However, their concerns and confusion were promptly allayed when Naruto gave them both a quick pat on the shoulder and clarified that Kakashi's father was known as the White Fang of Konoha. She was identified as Lady Chiyo, a village elder and a formidable puppeteer, and the grandmother of Sasori of the Red Sands, a member of the Akatsuki and one of the people who abducted Gaara, Godime Cage of Tsunade, after the woman had been calmed down. Following the introductions, the group took their seats in the waiting area and waited for Kankuro to wake up. As they waited, Riku decided that this was the best time to start the talk she wanted to have with the other girls. She then gestured for the other girls to join her, leaving Naruto where he was sitting. They then went to the opposite side of the waiting area and sat down so they could start talking about their feelings for their gorgeous blonde boyfriend. With a slight frown on her face, Riku said, "All right, now that we have some time, I want to talk about your feelings for my fiancé. Just when did you realize you were all in love with him? How long?" Meru scowled at this and turned her head, briefly glancing in Naruto's direction before returning her determined gaze to her best friend's eyes. "I realized my feelings for him 6 months before you and he got together. That means I've been in love with him for at least a year now, Riku. Possibly longer before I realized it. I didn't act on my feelings. And when you and he got together, I thought I had lost my chance. I felt crushed and I started to hate myself for not acting sooner. But at the same time, I was happy for the two of you because you two are my best friends. I love you both and I want you to know that," she explained with the smallest of grins on her face and tears in her eyes. Looking saddened by her friend's distress, Riku hurriedly embraced her. With tears streaming down her cheeks, she embraced her best friend and surrogate sister and said, "It's okay, Meru. I'm sorry you had to hurt by yourself for so long. Naru, he's got such a big heart and I promise he can make us both happy. All of us happy." Riku eventually withdrew from her close friend and turned to face the remnant pair. "And you too, when did you realize your feelings for my hunky man, And what made you fall for the good ball of sunshine?" Before Blake pushed her with her elbow and told her to be serious, Yang giggled a little at how Riku portrayed Naruto. The blonde sighed, gave Riku a single nod, and met Riku's eyes directly. "Well, I kinda realized it about 4 months ago. Blakey here's been interested in him for about a whole year now though. My reason though, does one really need a reason for falling in love with someone? The heart wants what the heart wants, right? But if I had to give a reason, or reasons, well, he's a really great guy. He's just so sweet and charming. He's also a great big ball of energy and he's just so much fun to be with. Naruto's also got a hell of a mischievous side if his past pranks are anything to go on, and I can't wait to help him unleash some real chaos back in the village with some new pranks when we get the chance. She smiled and laughed. There's a lot of reasons I guess, but I think I've said enough, don't you? How about you, kitty cat? After blushing at the moniker, Blake struck Yang across the arm. She sighed and shook her head, her cat ears drooping on top of her head, asking, "How many times do I have to tell you not to call me that in front of others?" Yang's smile was sufficient response, so the faunus woman sighed once more and shook her head. "Never mind, you're never going to stop, are you?" she asked. "Oh well." Blake gave Riku a resolute glance and then straightened in her chair after giving her a single nod. "Like Yang said, I've been in love with him for an entire year now. And I don't need a reason to be in love with him. But if you really need me to say something to explain it, I will. He and I are alike in many ways. He doesn't judge me for being a faunus just like I don't judge him for being a Jinchuriki. He helped me realize that I don't need to hide who and what I am. I no longer wear my bow to conceal my ears because of him. He likes me for what I am. Naruto thinks, he thinks I'm pretty as I am. He likes my extra appendages and pets my ears and it feels good." Blake had to cover her eyes with her hands to hide her blushing face and to conceal the fact that she was on the verge of tears due to a range of emotions. "Naruto is such a wonderful man. I love spending time with him. I can't get enough of being in his presence. Just being near him is intoxicating. All I want is to be with him and Yang as much as possible. I love them both so much. His scent, his touch, his laugh, his eyes, his everything, it's all too much to bear. I need him as much as I need my Yang. So please don't take this chance to be happy away from me, Riku. I need him," Blake begged, looking into Riku's eyes with a look that brought tears to her eyes. Even the words that Blake had just spoken to Riku left her speechless. Gazing at Yang, she noticed a reassuring smile on the girl's face as she embraced her girlfriend and kept her close, massaging her back and forth in an attempt to soothe her. Yang was looking at her as though to say, "I told you so." Riku closed her eyes, gave a single nod of approval, and leaned back in her chair with a gentle smile of approval on her face. "I don't know what true, authentic love is if that isn't it." With genuine curiosity about Tawa's thoughts on the subject, Riku asked, "Okay. Welcome to the family, Yang, Blake. Now what about you, Tawa? I thought you were still on the fence about the whole love thing after what happened between you and the scumbag that married Toki in your world." Tawa shook her head and gave a small laugh. "I realized my feelings about 3 months ago. I tried to simply deny them and say that I wasn't feeling anything for Naruto, and that worked for the most part because, well, you were his girlfriend, fiancé. I wasn't about to come between the two of you, and I wasn't interested in trying out a relationship again after what happened with Zack. But, as time went on, I realized that Naruto was so much different from Zack and would never hurt me like Zack did. And then when Naruto was put in the CRA and I gave my advice to Meru, not sorry about that by the way," Tawa said to Riku with a large grin on her face, "I figured I'd go ahead and take my own advice and give a relationship with Naruto a shot. So, here I am. I want to be with Naruto too. So if you'll let me be a part of this family you're all a part of, I'd be very happy with you," the former princess said with a smile on her face. Riku grinned at her friend with the blonde hair, gave her a hug, and nodded once. "Of course, I'd rather share him with all of you than with someone we can't trust. Though now comes the question of what to do about Sakura. How do you all feel about her? I mean, from the stories we've heard, she used to clobber him a lot for the stupidest reasons. But, she seems like she's changed for the better and has genuine feelings for him now. When we left her, did you see the state she was in after Naruto's rejection? I felt kinda bad for her," Riku said with a bit of worry. Tawa sighed at this and made the decision to express her thoughts. "Personally, I don't care if she's changed or not. I don't trust her with our Naruto. Who's to say she won't go right back to clobbering him for the dumbest of reasons? Nobody hurts our Naruto for any reason," she grumbled. At this point, Yang raised a counter-argument. "Well, say we give her a chance. What if we made it perfectly clear to her that if we give her a chance, that she can't hit Naruto for any reason, even if he does something stupid that she doesn't like? Besides, I think she deserves a chance just like we do." At this point, Meru made the decision to speak up and act as the voice of reason. I say that we wait until we return to Konoha before we make a decision about this. While you both make good points, it would be best that we speak with Sakura about this and see exactly what made her change her feelings regarding Naruto. We can speculate all we want right now, but we shouldn't make any hasty decisions without first confronting her. Agreed. The others glanced back at Meru after nodding in agreement with one another. As one, they all said, agreed. A nurse emerged before anyone could say anything more, telling the group that Kankuro was awake and wanted to see them. As Temari entered his room, she hurried to embrace him and told him how foolish he was, but she was also relieved that he was okay. Her eyes were watering, but Kankuro's attention was more on the people he didn't recognize in the room. But instead of inquiring about them, he turned to face Kakashi and Naruto and offered them a fragment of Sasori's cloak. Use this to find my brother. Bring him back. Maybe once you've brought him back, then you can tell me who all these people are, he joked. Naruto nodded and grinned at him. Sure thing, Kankuro. You just get some rest and leave rescuing Gaara to us. We'll get him back here in no time, just you watch. Those Akatsuki bastards won't know what hit him, he said with assurance. The group then left the hospital room, but before Temari could accompany them, Chiyo turned to her and instructed her to stay behind and handle matters while the Cage was away. In the meantime, Chiyo would go to punish her misbehaving grandson by joining the group in her place. Given her age, Naruto would have previously questioned Chiyo about this and asked if she was certain she could keep up or if she needed any assistance, but he now knew better and reasoned that if she was willing to participate, she must be confident in her abilities. So the big group, which he lovingly called Granny, Chiyo, hurried out of Suna and started to follow Sasori's trail. Itachi Uchiha, another Akatsuki member, stopped the large group shortly after they arrived in the land of rivers. Naruto quickly yelled at his girlfriends to avoid staring into his eyes, and they all turned to look at his feet instead. Itachi laughed, as if he thought this was funny. A moment later, he raised his voice. It's good to see you again, Naruto-kun. Do tell me, how have you been? Better than you've been, I'm sure. But we're not here to talk. Get out of the way, Itachi, we need to rescue Gaara. I won't let you assholes kill him. Naruto fumed. He wouldn't allow this jerk to hold him up for very long. He swiftly started going through a series of hand seals with his hands behind his back before rushing forward as quickly as he could. When he was close enough, Naruto raised his head until his mouth was level with Itachi's chest and mentally yelled his technique. Great Fireball technique for fire release. Itachi's form was instantly consumed by a massive fireball that erupted from Naruto's mouth. It wasn't meant to be, though, as Itachi quickly used a substitution technique to swap himself out for a log behind Yamato, then attacked him from behind with his own great fireball technique. Yamato, on the other hand, was ready for this and promptly built a mud wall to defend himself. This is when Riku grinned, hurriedly put on her Dark Knight dress sphere, and used the unusual magic spell to cast Bio on Itachi, surprising him. Itachi, who wasn't used to the attack, was momentarily stunned, but that was all. Riku's expression changed from one of surprise that Itachi wasn't poisoned to one of realization. Nevertheless, Itachi focused on her before she could respond. He decided that the girl was the most dangerous of the group, even though the others were unknown at the moment. He turned on her and was about to attack when Meru forced him to sidestep a hammer blow. Suddenly, he noticed that he was slowing down. He glanced slowly to his right and saw the blonde, who had her hair pulled back in a ponytail, smirking and waving goodbye. SHT was Itachi's final thought as his clone technique failed and he felt several attacks land before collapsing to the ground. Chiyo shook her head and scowled when she saw the body lying in front of them. She scuffed and hurried away, following Pakun as he started to hurry off in the direction of Sasori's trail again. I almost can't believe it. This is one of our men. It's no wonder, then, that the Akatsuki got into our village so easily. Come, we'd better hurry. After giving the body a brief scowl, Naruto turned and followed the others away. Itachi, that was nearly too simple. It seems as though you simply gave us the victory. However, why are you allowing us to get away with it so easily? Or did you not think my girls would possess such skills? Did we surprise you so much that you were unable to defend against any of our attacks? I wonder which was it. He frowned as he rushed along, thinking inquisitively. The cave hideout of Akatsuki 10 minutes later. When Team Yamato and Team Guy arrived at the hideout where the Akatsuki were waiting, they quickly learned that they had encountered a clone of Kisame, another Akatsuki member. But at the moment, none of that mattered. Dealing with the massive boulder in their path and the seal tag attached to it was crucial. Naruto scowled and made the decision to speak. That looks like a 5-point barrier seal. Normally we'd need to find the other 4 seal tags and remove them all at once, but I can easily slap a counter seal on the one here and negate that particular issue. However, the problem comes from the boulder. Hey Meru, think you can do something about that? Naruto asked his lovely girlfriend. Meru smiled and flexed a muscle as she gave him a single, firm nod. You betcha Naruto. Just take care of that annoying seal and I'll show you how it's done. Naruto chuckled at this, gave a single nod, and immediately started working on a counter seal. After finishing, he leapt up onto the rock wall and proceeded to the seal. He then slammed the counter seal on top of the 5-point barrier seal and yelled, "Dispel seal, release." The 5-point barrier seal was cancelled with a chakra pulse that was audible for more than 3 miles. Meru waited only a moment for her boyfriend to jump away after the barrier seal was nullified, then she spread her wings and charged some magic into her hands. A huge ball of fire materialized in her hands in an instant. Take this you stupid rock. Hope you enjoy some wingly magic. Ha, she exclaimed, then hurled the strong fireball forward, causing everyone to cover their eyes as it struck the rock and burst into a brilliant flash of light and flame. They were all in disbelief when the light dimmed enough for them to see once more. The enormous boulder had vanished. Not one pebble at all. It had been vaporized, the whole thing. The ninja there obviously didn't want to get on her bad side because whatever she had just used was so powerful. Never. When Meru noticed that every ninja, with the exception of Naruto, was staring at her in confusion, she shrugged her shoulders and said, "What? If you're done staring, shouldn't we get in there and rescue Gaara now?" The large group's moods were quickly soured by what they saw when they rushed into the cave after snapping out of their stupors. They noticed that one of the 2 Akatsuki members was perched atop Suna's dead cage. With rage brewing inside of him, Naruto clenched and unclenched his fists. Despite the nearly uncontrollable spiking of his chakra, he remained composed and in control of himself. He nevertheless made the decision to speak. He snarled, You bastards. How dare you do this to him?" Deidara smirked at this and turned to face him. "Ah, you must be the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, We were told about you. You seem much calmer than we were told though. Especially considering we just killed your dear friend here. Too bad, so sad, he said with a sarcastic voice. Sasori told his partner, "You talk too much." The shorter of the 2 scowled under his cloak and shook his head, surveying all their opponents. "We're at a severe disadvantage here Deidara. If we aren't careful, we could die here today. Take this seriously or you will perish." Deidara dismissed him, much to Sasori's annoyance, saying, Yeah. Don't get your panties in a bunch." The blonde bomber laughed as he got on his clay bird, had it swallow Gaara, and then flew out of the cave and took him. "Just watch, this'll be easy. Now, what say we have some fun?" he said. At this, Naruto scowled and immediately started yelling commands. "Sorry Yamato-sensei, but I know my girls better than you do. Riku, Tawa, stay here and help Yamato-sensei and Granny Chiyo take down Sasori. Guy-sensei, Neji, Lee, please back them up. You can't really help against a flyer like Deidara. Meru, Yang, Blake, Kakashi-sensei, and Tenten, you're with me. We're going after the blonde bastard that took Gaara. We can't let him get away." He spoke quickly before fleeing the cave to find Deidara. Kakashi nodded his head and grinned at Yamato. Before hurriedly leaving with his team, Kakashi said, "Well, you heard him. I think his idea sounds great. Good luck Yamato. Everyone, let's go." The others remained behind to assist in defeating Sasori. When he found himself alone with a sizable crowd, Sasori scowled. He was aware that he was going to face the battle of his life, even though there weren't as many as there had been previously. He quickly struck out with his tail, hoping that this attack would at least kill his grandmother. He was about to open his mouth to release thousands of Senbon needles laced with a very strong toxin when she swiftly dodged, but before anyone could react, something happened. Tawa quickly cast her time surge spell and accelerated time around herself because she had a terrible feeling that something terrible was about to happen that no one could possibly prepare for. She hurried forward more quickly than anyone could see and used her strongest earth and fire spells on Sasori in that order. This resulted in the release of a chemistry spell that created a pool of lava beneath Sasori and started to draw his puppet body into it. When time returned to normal, Sasori's puppet body was attacked and swiftly destroyed, forcing him to reveal his real body, while Tawa swiftly fled from Sasori and returned to her friends. He was upset that a blonde bitch had defeated him so easily. With a crazy smile on his face, he opened a scroll and called forth the Sandame Kage, master of the Iron Sand, saying, "I don't know how you did that, but it won't happen again. Prepare to meet my favorite puppet." Chiyo was unable to avoid scowling at her grandson. She shook her head in disappointment and sadness as she said, "So you're the one that killed him. I can't believe you would stoop so low, Sasori. How despicable you've become." She opened a scroll of her own, summoned her mother and father puppets, and got ready to fight her precious grandson. Sasori shook his head and sneered at this. "What, do you think I'll have some kind of emotional response at seeing my parents again, Grandma Chiyo? Hardly. They'll be destroyed like the cheap puppets they are." His voice was bitter. After tiring of the conversation, Riku transformed into her gun mage dress sphere. After changing, she spun around and grinned broadly before pointing her magic gun at Sasori and raising her voice. She aimed and fired at the Sandame Kage puppet, sending a mortar blast that swiftly tore through the air towards her opponent. "Time to take you and your puppet down like the small fry you are." "Mortar," she yelled. Sasori had his puppet build a huge wall of iron sand to block the attack because he didn't want to risk his puppet being destroyed. However, he and the others were completely taken aback when Riku's attack tore through the wall and proceeded on its way, tearing through the Sandame Kage and destroying it in a single blast. Sasori was powerless to stop it. He fell to his knees and gazed at the creatures in front of him in complete horror. Because they could only be that. His Hiriko puppet had been destroyed so quickly by one of the women that no one could see her move. And even the Sandame Kage's iron sand was powerless to stop the attack that this one had unleashed. They were monsters. It's simple. Sasori knew deep down that he would die if he remained here, but he also knew that he would not escape. With a resigned sigh, he opened his chest and called forth his army of 100 puppets, his ultimate weapon. Not even having had a chance to use her mother and father puppets before resealing them and summoning her 10 puppets for this battle, Chiyo couldn't help but laugh to herself. She was pleasantly surprised by Naruto's girlfriend's strength, which she hadn't anticipated. The fight quickly broke out, with everyone slashing out and taking down every puppet they saw. To the annoyance of everyone present, Guy and Lee collaborated in an extraordinary way, yelling about youth this and youth that. Neji was killing them with vicious efficiency, cutting the chakra strings that bound them to Sasori and trying to keep himself and his loved ones safe. Together, Riku and Tawa were destroying as many puppets as they could. Due to the puppets' resemblance to Machina, Riku was using her Dismantle Fiend Hunter ability on them, and it appeared to be working pretty well, destroying them in breathtaking explosions of wooden showers. Tawa was using magic to blast them away, and she would use her dagger to cut down anyone who came too close. She did not want to waste the few bullets she had on these pitiful wooden creatures because they were a valuable resource. Having not had a good fight like this in a long time, Chiyo was having a great time. With her army of 10, she was easily eliminating a good number of puppets. She could fix them later, if she lived to see tomorrow, even though she had lost a few of them in the battle. If not, she would let Kankuro take care of her puppets. In contrast, Yamato was destroying as many puppets as he could with his deft use of his wood and earth release jutsus. They pursued Sasori after all the puppets had been destroyed, but he appeared to have a few more tricks up his sleeve as he threw flames from his hands in their direction, forcing them to move quickly to avoid being burned. Sasori was flipped end over end threw straight up through the air as Guy and Lee kicked him as hard as they could after removing their weights and swiftly disappearing in bursts of speed. Riku smirked at him and aimed at his heart as he started to fall. She pressed the trigger of her gun and fired, watching with satisfaction as her bullet pierced his heart and he fell to the ground in a heap. "Say goodnight, Buster." "Blammo," she said. Sasori laughed a little, then coughed, realizing that he was now dying. He waited for the group to get close enough to him before he spoke, gesturing for them to do so. Before the light finally went out of his eyes and he departed into the afterlife, Sasori laughed and said, "I might as well leave you all with a parting gift. I was to meet a spy of mine in Orochimaru's service in a week's time. The meeting was to take place on Tenchi Bridge. If you want to get that Uchiha of yours back, that's the best time to strike." Yamato let out a sigh and shook his head, taking a moment to process the information. He shrugged his shoulders casually and said, "A spy in Orochimaru's care, Hokage-sama will want to hear this. Though I can't say for sure what she'll want done about the Uchiha. He is a traitor after all." Let's reconvene with the others. They should be done with their foe by now. He replied. The group swiftly left the cave and hurried off to find the others after saying, if not, we should back them up. With Naruto's team earlier, Naruto was trying to come up with a plan to take the blonde bomber out of the sky as they pursued Deidara. He decided to ask Meru if she could do something after giving her a quick glance. Meru-chan, do you think you could fly up there and knock him off of that bird? If you don't feel comfortable with it, that's okay. I don't want to put you at risk. He responded. Before spreading her wings and grinning at him, Meru gave him a few gentle pats on the cheek and a charming smile. Before she took off more quickly than Deidara had anticipated and materialized in front of him, stopping the Akatsuki member in his tracks, she said, just watch this Naruto. She struck him with her hammer before he could respond, making him lower his bird to dodge the blow. Meru's first attack, though, was a feint. As she lowered one of her hands, she disclosed that she had charged it with some of her wingly magic and sent a point-blank lightning blast straight into his face, sending him flying off his bird and crashing into the forest below, in addition to causing him to feel excruciating pain shoot through his entire body. Meru smirked down at her boyfriend, giving him a cheeky grin and a thumbs up, while laughing at her success. She said, told ya I could do it, Naru. Now let's go kick his butt. And took off for Deidara, utterly oblivious to the bird tumbling to the water below. With a quick glance at his companions, Naruto nodded first toward the bird and then in the direction Meru had gone. He said, Kakashi and Tenten, you're with me. We're going to get Gaara's body to safety. Young, Blake, you two go help Meru with Deidara. We'll catch up as soon as we can. Then, with Kakashi and Tenten following closely behind, he leapt off in the direction of the bird that was approaching the water at a frightening rate. Yang nodded toward Blake, and the two of them hurried after Meru to help her defeat Deidara once and for all. They arrived at the battle site to find their friend wearing her dragoon armor, fighting off an army of clay creatures, and Deidara struggling to stay in the fight, panting heavily. He was clearly having trouble even staying upright, let alone continuing the battle. In an attempt to buy himself some time to recover, the blonde bomber started firing some of his explosive clay creations at them as soon as he noticed that the two of them had arrived on the scene. His eyebrows twitched a few times. As soon as Blake realized how dangerous these things were, she alerted her girlfriend to the danger. In the hopes that her girlfriend would follow her advice, she warned, be careful, Young, these things are dangerous. I don't know exactly what they can do, but I'd rather not find out. Don't just rush recklessly into this, okay? Don't let them get on you, whatever you do. In fact, try to avoid contact with them entirely. Try to go directly for Deidara instead. If we take him out, we should be able to stop his creations in their entirety. Yang gave her girlfriend a comforting smile and gave her a single nod. Before she hurried forward, the blonde bombshell said, Gotcha, Blakey. I'll be careful, I promise. Let's do this. She did everything she could to avoid getting caught in the clay creations, including dodging, jumping over, and ducking under them. She used her Ember Celica gauntlets to blast them when she was unable to avoid them, and soon discovered that they were, of all things, clay explosives. She glanced at her girlfriend out of the corner of her eye and noticed that Blake had noticed what she had done. He nodded at her before she started running toward Deidara, determined to get rid of the bastard before anything bad happened. Blake, however, was working with Meru to reduce the quantity of clay explosives. Unlike her girlfriend, who was a close-ranged melee fighter, she was able to quickly take out the explosives from a safe distance because of the greater reach of her katana, Gamble Shroud, and her ability to throw, twirl, and swing it around. In order to keep her enemies away from her and deal with those who approached her and Meru too closely, Blake made it her personal mission to provide her girlfriend with some form of cover fire. But one of the clay spiders that had slipped around behind her and Meru escaped Blake's notice. She screamed out in horror, surprise, and agony as it slowly crawled up the back of her leg, attached itself to her back, and started to glow brightly before exploding, shocking everyone. Yang was taken aback by her girlfriend's fate and gaped in horror at her location as smoke enveloped her body. But instead of letting grief consume her, she focused on Deidara and let her anger take control, bringing forth her berserker form, her eyes turning red and her hair flailing wildly. To his astonishment and horror, Yang yelled, "You rotten bastard! I'll fucking murder you," as she charged forward, destroying everything in her path and completely ignoring any subsequent explosions as she got closer to her target. At the same time, Blake had been caught in the explosion, and Naruto, Kakashi, and Tenten had just arrived on the scene. As he feared the worst, Naruto's eyes widened in horror and tears started to slowly trickle down his cheeks. He yelled, "No, no, Blake, Blocky," and then glared at Deidara. He screamed, "You rotten bastard. Die," before his powers suddenly came back to life and a new portal appeared before him. Shit, not again. Pandora. At the same moment. No, this was not intended to occur. What is going on, exactly? It was unbelievable to her. She did not accept it. She had just emerged victorious from a fierce battle with her friends. The death wall had been overcome. After a long, hard battle with that and a ton of fucking turrets and loaders, they had stormed all the way through that fucking fortress and destroyed that fucking BNK3R. My goodness, it was pure chaos. Then, after being given access to control Core Angel by fucking handsome Jack's voice, which Axton still detested, they engaged in yet another protracted battle after discovering that, of all things, Angel was a freaking siren. But then, when you think about it, it made sense. However, as they were conversing after Angel passed away, handsome Jack appeared and shot Roland. Roland, he passed out in front of them. Gage simply couldn't comprehend it. She had come to like the soldier, she had to admit. Despite his eccentricities, he was a good man who treated them like family. That was something she liked about him. But now, he was gone because of this fucking rotten bastard. Lilith attempted to attack him before she could take any action. At this point, Lilith was told to attack the 6 of them by Jack, who put a collar of some sort around her neck. Lilith, of course, objected and started to teleport them away, but Gage blinked and glanced over her shoulder, sensing that something was wrong. A strange tear in the fabric of time and space was just floating there, right in front of her eyes. How did she find out? Of course, she was a genius. Unfortunately, Lilith's attempt to teleport everyone resulted in the teleportation of the other 5 while pushing Gage forward into the space-time tear before she could say or do anything. Gage sighed and accepted her fate, hoping that wherever she ended up, she would be able to murder someone or something because she was angry. Returning to the elemental nations, Gage moaned and hurried to her feet after falling out of the portal and landing on her rump, then rubbed her butt. She said grumpily, "Ouch. Talk about a rough landing." She watched as the rift in time and space closed behind her, then turned to face the blonde with the spiky hair, a cyclops, and a girl with a bundle of hair and a huge scroll on her back. She quickly concluded that this group had a grudge against the attractive boy after turning to face the opposite direction and witnessing a blonde chick attempting to murder him. She chose to turn back to the others and pose a question to them. With a slight frown on her face, she asked, "Hey, do any of you mind if I kill that cute boy blonde over there? I'm feeling a little angry right now and need to release some tension." Before Naruto could respond, Kakashi chose to respond to her odd request for the 3 of them by blinking. He smiled and said, "Feel free. He is our enemy after all." Whistling a cheerful little tune, Gage whipped out her shock SMG and skipped off towards Deidara, grinning at the silver-haired Cyclops. When she got close enough, she aimed and hit him with a barrage of electric bullet hell. He didn't have time to duck out of the way in time because the bullets were flying so quickly and in such large numbers. Deidara's weakness struck him so repeatedly that he fell to the ground, trembled, and finally passed away from his wounds. When he was unconscious, Gage came up to him, aimed her explosive pistol at his head, and fired it straight into his skull, watching as it exploded in a shower of blood, bone, and brain matter, not caring at all that some of it landed on her legs and clothing. She slipped her pistol away and turned back to the others, waving and smiling. She said with a smile, "Hiya. The name's Gage. Who are you guys?" Despite her internal turmoil following Roland's passing, she made the decision to try and take advantage of her new circumstances. After all, she was a girl who could adjust to almost any circumstance, and she still had her best friend Deathtrap, so everything would work out for her. But Naruto wasn't worried about Gage at the moment. Rather, he quickly apologized to the girl, hurried past her to where Blake was, and grinned when he noticed that she was coughing and curled up on the ground. She felt some pain, but not much. Her aura clearly suffered the most from the harm. Yang rushed over, knelt down, and embraced her girlfriend, holding her close. Satisfied that they were both okay, Naruto knelt down and gave them both a hug. He was simply relieved that everyone was okay, but he was really concerned about the 2 of them. The other people arrived to this scene. They thought they would later question their initial confusion about the new girl on the scene. Rather, The second Akatsuki member and the Kage's location were the more crucial subjects. Yamato made the decision to ask the question that was on everyone's mind. Alright, where is Deidara and who is the girl? Gage smirked as he glanced at the newcomers and then at the odd man. If you're talking about the blonde pretty boy, I killed him. Just blew his brains out after pumping him full of zappy bullets from hell and boom. One seriously dead villain for the pleasure of yours truly. As for me, I'm Gage. Nice to meet ya creepy looking dude, she said with a smile on her face. This made Naruto laugh, and he glanced at the others before he and his girlfriends approached the group. I like you. You remind me of me and my girlfriends. Though I have to apologize for pulling you from your universe and world the way I did. It wasn't intentional, I assure you. I still don't have full control over my powers, especially when I'm angry or feeling too emotional. He explained while massaging his forehead. Gage smirked at Naruto after giving him a thorough examination. She licked her lips as she considered the fun she could have studying this specific specimen. Ah, I see, so you're the one who has the power to open holes in the fabric of space and time. How interesting. I think I'm going to have to study you, mister. Do tell me, what's your name, handsome? She asked. Riku pointed directly at the girl while narrowing her eyes. Hey, you don't get any funny ideas now. He's our man and you aren't going to be making any moves on him when you don't even know anything about him. You can be his friend and get to know him, but nothing more than that, got it? And no getting any ideas about dissecting him like he's some research project either. You can spend time talking with him and perhaps even try to help him learn about his powers and offer up advice, but don't go trying anything weird. Understand me, missy? Gage chuckled at this and smirked at the girl before turning to face Naruto, who merely grinned at his girlfriend and then at her as though to convey that the ball was now in her court. He was clearly supportive of his girlfriend's choice. Clearly, this guy has been whipped. Gage laughed and thought to herself. She shrugged her shoulders, nodded her head, and let out a soft sigh. Alright, you win. No funny thoughts, and no trying anything weird. I promise. Besides, as cute as he is, I don't even know him yet. I wouldn't just try and jump into a relationship with someone right off the bat. I'm only 15 years old, you know. She replied with a smirk. Got plenty of time to grow up and have some fun. Riku turned to Blake and examined her after Naruto's girls nodded in agreement. Alright, it looks like your aura protected you from whatever attack you received that had these two worried so much over you. Still though, you are wounded. Allow me to heal you up real quick before we go get Gaara's body. God, I hate saying that. I'm so sorry, Naruto, she said with a sad expression on her face when she saw her husband. At this, Naruto shook his head and cast his gaze to the ground. At the moment, he was at a loss for words to express his feelings. He was aware that the magic of Riku and Meru could save people who were about to die, but bringing the recently dead back to life. He was fairly certain that even their extraordinary abilities couldn't accomplish that. Nevertheless, he hoped that something could be done, just possibly. With a deep sigh, he gave his clones in charge of protecting Gaara's body a mental command and waited for them to deliver the body so that, hopefully, something could be done for him. To the relief of the cat-eared girl, Riku used this time to heal Blake while they awaited the delivery of Gaara's body. Even though she would have to buy new clothes, being alive was far more important. When Gaara's body and Naruto's two clones arrived a short while later, they gave their creator a solemn look and shook their heads sympathetically before dispelling. Deciding he would be the one to carry Gaara back, the blonde ninja approached and lifted him into his arms. As he walked, tears started to fall down his cheeks, with the sizable crowd trailing him a short distance behind. But Chiyo took a little longer to consider her options. With a sigh, she made up her mind, gave herself a firm nod, and hurried forward to catch Naruto's pace. When she came to an open field, she made the decision to speak. To everyone's surprise, she said, Naruto, lay Gaara down here. I'm going to use a jutsu to revive him. She made the decision to explain before anyone could interrupt. It's called one's own life reincarnation. Now lay him down and allow me to begin the process, she said. Naruto nodded, placed his friend figure on the ground, and let Chiyo start working. But there was something he needed to ask her. Granny Chiyo, are you completely certain about this? You're giving up your life in exchange for his. Is this really what you want? I've lived a long, good life, young Naruto. Do I have regrets? Oh, most certainly, but I'm happy with the life I've led. However, it's necessary for the old to pave way for the youth. Gaara was taken before his time, and it's only right of me to give him the chance to live again. Besides, the village needs their cage. They don't need an old hag like me anymore, Chiyo said in a friendly manner before laughing at her self-deprecating remarks. Tears began to fall down Naruto's cheeks once more, and he knelt down to assist her by giving up some of his chakra to expedite the process. He also sensed that she was running low on chakra. Granny Chiyo, I'll never forget you. You're a good person and I'll miss you. I'm sorry it came to this. I really am. If you had lived, I bet you would have been like the grandma I never had. We might not have seen each other much, but I really do think we could have been like family, he said with a tearful grin on his face. With a gentle smile, Chiyo put her forehead against his. I would have liked that very much, Naruto-kun. You would have made a fine grandson, she said with a sigh. The jutsu ended successfully after a few more moments, and the elderly woman started to fall to the side, dead. But Naruto took her in his arms, held her close, and shed tears for her just as he did for Gaara. He would always be grateful to her for saving his best friend, and she was a good woman. After 10 minutes, they were waiting for Gaara to wake up, talking among themselves about whatever was on their minds, so they were a little taken aback when a whole army of Suna ninja, led by Temari and Baki, arrived on the scene. As the group looked at them, they couldn't help but laugh uncomfortably and wave their hands. Naruto simply glanced at Gaara and replied, "We're just waiting for him to wake up. Though, Granny Chiyo had to give her life to revive him. We didn't make it in time to save him. I'm sorry. Granny Chiyo had to use a jutsu to revive him and it took her life in the process." While Baki maintained a stony face that revealed nothing of his true emotions, Temari appeared both happy and saddened by this news. The other ninja were simply anticipating that their beloved Kage would awaken anytime soon and that everything would be alright. While some were saddened by Elder Chiyo's death, they were also relieved that their Kage was safe and sound as a result of her sacrifice. Gaara's eyes slowly opened and he finally stirred after a moment. Naruto rushed over and gave him a gentle smile while clenching his own hand and looking down at him. With the hope that his friend was back to normal, he asked, "Gaara, I'm glad you're okay. How do you feel?" Gaara gave his brother figure a feeble smile and opened his mouth to reply, but his two fangirls pushed Naruto away and surrounded him. They continued, "Kage-sama, are you okay? How do you feel? Are you hurt?" He was upset that his best and closest friend had been pushed aside so violently, but he wasn't in a position to take action at the moment. Instead, he sighed grudgingly and closed his eyes once more, shaking his head and letting out a frustrated sigh without even trying to deign to respond. At times, Sari and Matsuri were absolutely unbearable, and now they had actually annoyed him, if not outright enraged him, which was difficult to do these days. Meanwhile, Naruto scoffed in frustration and glared daggers at their backs. He yelled, "Bitches, the both of them. What the hell?" before going back to his girlfriends and sitting down with them once more while furiously crossing his arms over his chest. "I don't even get a thank you from them for helping to save his life. No, I get shoved aside and I don't even get to talk to my best friend. Fucking hell." Riku put her boyfriend's head on her shoulder and gave him a tight hug. "It'll be alright, Naruto. We'll talk to him later, I promise. I'm sure he's just as annoyed right now as you are with them. Seriously though, they don't need to be so darn rude. Look, Temari's coming over here at least," she said, gesticulating toward her boyfriend. As they all turned to face the direction Riku was indicating, they saw Temari approaching them. Naruto got to his feet to welcome her, but he was taken aback when Temari embraced him and started sobbing into his shoulder. She said, "Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing my baby brother back to me, Naruto. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come to our aid. So thank you so much, Naruto." She thanked him and withdrew. Temari shuffled around for a moment before putting her hands on Naruto's chest and leaning forward to kiss him. She licked at his lips, pleading for access to his mouth, clenching his shirt in her fists and closing her eyes as she moaned into the kiss and relished the taste of him on her lips. At first, Naruto wasn't sure what to do because he was taken aback by Temari's forwardness and what was taking place. He was engaged to someone. He was in a relationship. However, this was pleasant. He did care about Temari, and she was a lovely woman. In spite of his internal objections, he found himself opening his mouth and letting Temari explore it for a while before their tongues started to tussle. They both had fierce blushes on their faces and pressed their foreheads against each other when they finally separated. With a broad smile, Temari whispered, "Wow. That was amazing. Naruto couldn't help but nod slightly in agreement and laugh a little. He replied, yeah. His girlfriends, however, expressed their displeasure with the recent events. Meiru made the decision to advocate for them. The blonde Suna Kunoichi was obviously upset with her. Hey, what the heck do you think you're doing, Temari? That's a heck of a way to say, thank you. Or are you genuinely interested in our man? When we get back to Suna, we're going to need to have a talk about this. Meiru scratched at her nose awkwardly, and Temari looked away, flinching at the tone of her voice. Yeah, about that, I've kinda had a crush on him since he changed my brother for the better. My feelings only intensified when I saw him again recently, and now I just couldn't stop myself. She went on to laugh sheepishly. When she was done, she turned to face the other girls and glared at them. I'm dead serious though, I'm willing to fight you girls for a chance at being with him. Riku sighed, raised her hand, and shook her head. Like Meiru said, we'll talk about this when we return to Suna. We've already decided to talk with Sakura. We might as well talk things over with you as well now. You do realize though that if you want to be with Naruto, you'll have to move to Konoha, right? Are you willing to make that change? Temari scowled at this point, but she turned to face her brother and gave him a gentle smile while his fangirls, Sari and Matsuri, kept swooning over him. I would miss my brothers greatly, but they're all that keeps me grounded in Sunagakure. With Gaara's permission, I should easily be able to transfer from Suna to Konoha. That is, if you'll allow me into your family, she inquired with some trepidation. Riku smiled softly at Temari and said, like I said, we'll talk about it. But it's nice to know that you're willing to go that far to be with him. She turned to face Naruto, who was still somewhat dazed but at least listening to what they were saying. With a slight smirk, the blonde thief remarked, our man is more than worth any sacrifice. Each of us had to give up our worlds to be here with him, but we wouldn't have it any other way. Temari appeared perplexed by this assertion, but she made the decision to ignore it for the time being. Rather, she thought it would be best to move things along so they could go back to Suna and sleep. After fighting the Akatsuki and saving their Cage, the Konoha group could definitely use some rest, and Gaara could probably use a real bed to rest in. Taking a few steps forward, Temari clapped her hands loudly a couple of times before shouting, all right everyone, let's get Gaara and our friends from Konoha home to Suna. I think they've more than earned some nice, warm beds to sleep in, don't you? With a tiny smile tugging at her lips if she was certain she had everyone's attention. As he lifted Chiyo's body into his arms, Naruto made the decision that he would be the one to carry her back to Suna so that she could be buried properly in the village. He was thinking about the kiss he had had with Temari and what his girls had said to her the whole time. Oh no. Gage's appearance and this have left me totally perplexed. What in the world will I do? Later that evening, Sunagakure Hotel. Instead, Naruto was dealing with this shit, even though he would have preferred to be making out with his girlfriends at the moment. After deciding to call a team meeting, Yamato gathered everyone in his hotel room and started berating Naruto for giving everyone orders in the cave earlier. When the blonde ninja finally had enough of Yamato's nonsense, he got up, threw a finger in his face, yelled at him, and glared daggers at him. Naruto nodded gratefully, and Kakashi returned the nod with his trademark smile. Shut the hell up already, goddammit. I told you back in the cave that I knew my girls best. You haven't had time to get to know them well enough yet. Hell, Kakashi-sensei agreed with my decision. Thanks for that by the way, Kakashi. Naruto kept tearing into Yamato as he turned back to face him. You may be the team captain Yamato-sensei, but we are a team that was just thrown together a little over a day ago. I did what was best at the time and I expect you to understand that. Instead, here you are, tearing into me for some bullshit reason because I subverted your command, or some such bullshit. My girls proved themselves out there today, and instead of saying, good job, or giving them a pat on the back or something, you're being a monumental jackass. So you know what, Yamato? You can just fuck the hell off. If you don't change your damn mindset before we return to Konoha, I'm going to talk to Granny Tsunade about finding somebody else to captain this team because you clearly aren't going to work. Now good night. My girls and I are going to go to our rooms and get some rest. It's been a long day and I know I'd like to get some cuddle time with some of my girls. Yamato said, clearly furious with besides. Naruto and his girlfriends got up and left the room, with Gage soon following suit because she didn't want to stay after the group she was most interested in had left. Yamato, meanwhile, sat there in disbelief at the way he was spoken to. But Kakashi looked at his old friend and laughed. The cycloptic Jonin grinned and said, "Well, he sure showed you, didn't he, old friend? I have to admit, you walked right into that one. Naruto is right though, he did the right thing today and you really didn't need to come down on him so hard. His girlfriends are a virtual unknown to us, but to him, well, what he did was only natural. You should have shown that you trusted in him to make the right call and accepted that for the time being, at least until you've taken the time to get to know them yourself. Now, though, you might have caused some irreparable damage. You've got your work cut out for you, Yamato. Good luck repairing this situation." All Yamato could do in the meantime was think about what Kakashi had said and wonder how much he had messed up just now. Oh no, Hokage-sama thought to himself, flinching as he realized he was going to be in serious trouble when he found out about this. "I'm in serious trouble if I can't fix this before we return to Konoha, Kami." Silently, he thought to himself as he made his way to his own bed and fell asleep. The following morning, Temari was sitting in the Fantasia coffee shop with Riku and the other girls except for Gage. They were all enjoying their own brand of coffee in their own special way, whether it was with sugar, cream, or anything else they liked. But no, they weren't merely there to sip on some excellent coffee. They came to talk about Temari's feelings for their man, Naruto. Yang decided to start things off by speaking up. With a slight smile, she said, "So sister, when did you first realize you had feelings for our favorite blonde knucklehead?" She asked, letting out a little laugh. "I bet those feelings caught you by surprise, huh?" Temari nodded and laughed along with it. "I realized my feelings shortly after seeing him in the hospital after the Sasuke retrieval mission. When I saw him like that, it hurt so much more than I thought it would. It felt like my heart was ripping in two. Believe it or not, when no one was around, I gave him my first kiss. He may have been unconscious, but I gave him a kiss right on the lips and told him to wake up soon." She continued, giggling. At this, Naruto's girlfriends grinned and burst out laughing. Blake said, "That's so sweet and romantic, Temari." Here, Blake scowled a little and put a hand on the Suna Kunoichi's shoulder. To have felt so strongly for him for all this time. "But," he said, "are you 100% certain that you are ready to leave your home, and more importantly, your brothers, behind to be with him?" Temari nodded her head once and gave Blake a sincere smile in response to her worry. "Sure, I'll miss them greatly, but I can write them whenever I want to keep in touch. As for the village, like I said before, it may be where I was born and raised, but it's just a place I've lived. It may have been home to me, and I may miss it, but Naru-kun is so much more important to me than a place I've lived in. So yes, I'm sure I can leave it behind me," she explained with a genuine smile on her eyes. Naruto's girlfriends found this sufficient, and they all nodded in agreement with her responses. "Then we welcome you to the family, Temari. When are you going to let Gaara know?" replied Meru. The gorgeous blonde Suna Kunoichi smiled and said, "I'll let him know as soon as we're done here. I'd very much like to spend some time getting to know my future sisters." After saying this, the contented family started having joyful conversations with each other about whatever was on their minds, simply taking the time to get to know Temari better and Temari getting to know them better. Alongside Naruto, at the moment, Naruto, Kakashi, and Gage were sitting in his hotel room. He and Kakashi had agreed that it would be wise to talk to Gage about her origins and the specifics of her story. She had been quite cooperative up to this point, but they needed to figure out whether she was a friend or an enemy. Thus, they found themselves together, and thus far, she was proving to be a rather fascinating companion. And then I decided that, well, hey, cutting off my arm and replacing it with this metal one would allow me to better control my buddy Deathtrap. It worked like a charm. Though things kinda got out of control and Deathtrap kinda killed the hell out of somebody and I had to hitch a ride to this planet called Pandora. But it was totally cool cause I became what people called a Vault Hunter and Bam Bam Bloom. I was on this train and things were awesome and we were blowing up Handsome Jack's loader robots and then the train went kaboom. And we almost died in. At this point, Naruto and Kakashi exchanged glances and started to perspire, wondering how the girl could have so much energy to talk in such a way. However, they continued to listen and keep their ears open as she shared all of this information with them. Although a lot of this seemed like extraneous information to them, they could tell she was telling the truth. As ninja, however, they were unable to ignore any of it because you never know what might be significant. After all, look beneath the surface. Gage took a sip from her glass of water, glanced at Naruto, then smiled and gestured to him on the other side. You know, you kinda remind me of Axton. You look a little similar, but it's really about the personality. I get the feeling you're a fun-loving kinda guy and into adventure and all that. She then turned to Kakashi and gestured toward him. With a broad smile, she exclaimed, and you're totally like Zero. All mysterious and everything, super cool though. Anyways, as I was saying, we stormed the Bloodshot stronghold in our attempt to rescue Roland, the leader of the Crimson Raiders. Super cool name by the way. Anyways, when we got to Roland after killing so many of the bad guys, who should show up but a bunch of handsome Jack's fucking robots. We had to fight through the whole damn, she said with a bit of the humor in it, until we got to the constructor that had kidnapped him, and we had to fight that damn thing and destroy it before it could get away with him. Naturally we were total badasses and killed the hell out of that thing, thus saving Roland and everything. Every time Gage mentioned Roland, the two ninjas couldn't help but notice something was wrong. They could see the sadness in her eyes whenever she spoke of him. They both nodded as they looked at one another, already feeling as though they knew what had happened to this Roland person, and agreed to wait to hear the rest of her story. Gage kept telling them about her journey on the planet Pandora for a while longer, until she eventually arrived at the point where she was in control core angel. Tears started to fall down her cheeks, and she shook her head and hugged herself after taking a deep, trembling breath. Gage clenched her eyes tightly and started to shake. It was really difficult for her to speak at the moment. She was, at least, until Naruto approached her, put her head against his chest, and gave her a warm embrace. Holding her close, Gage blushed a little and said, Thank you Naruto. Gage inhaled deeply and exhaled slowly, deciding it would be best to wrap up her story. When we entered Control Core Angel, we learned that Angel wasn't a computer program, but another siren like Maya and Lilith. She was Handsome Jack's own daughter and he was pumping her full of iridium so he could use her to power the vault key. In the process he was killing his own daughter. She screamed. At this point, Kakashi and Naruto appeared utterly appalled and were unable to contain their rage at what they had just heard. How could a monster harm his own daughter in this way? But they continued to listen. She begged us to destroy the injectors and put an end to the process. To free her from the pain and stop the vault key from being charged, to put an end to Jack's ambition. But Jack, that fucking monster, he claimed he loved his daughter and sealed off the injectors with shields and began to throw an army of loaders at us. Roland, he helped us take down the shields around the first two injectors, allowing us to destroy the first two injectors, but the third one was unreachable until Lilith showed up. She helped Roland get to the final injector to take down the shield around that one. Gage sighed, closed her eyes tightly, and started crying. She laughed waterily as she remarked, when Angel died, she told her father to go to hell and even called him an asshole. But then, Handsome Jack showed up and shot Roland from behind. He couldn't even face Roland head on, he killed Roland. Like a fucking coward, and when Lilith went to attack him, he slapped this collar on her and ordered her to kill us. That's when Lilith tried to teleport us all away. But, I was pushed through that tear in space-time you created Naruto. The others were teleported away though, like Lilith meant for them to be. She said calmly, but, now you can see why I'm pissed off and don't like fucking pretty boys. Why I asked if I could kill that fucking pretty boy back there. Both Naruto and Kakashi nodded, demonstrating their comprehension of her distaste for attractive boys. They would probably want to exact revenge on Handsome Jack for what he did if they were in her position, but since he was out of her grasp, she needed someone else to vent her resentment on. At the time, Deidara was just a convenient target on whom to vent her anger. Naruto grinned as he glanced down at Gage and made the decision to make a suggestion. Maybe I should bring you along when we go to confront Sasuke. He's a pretty boy that turned traitor to the village. If he refuses to return with us to the village and attempts to kill me again, you might be able to have some fun with him. Naruto joked. At this, Gage smiled, but Kakashi interrupted. That's just evil Naruto. You know Sasuke would. Wait, never mind. Sasuke never had any plans to use those man parts of his. He had all the opportunity in the world to be with the girls back in Konoha that were practically throwing themselves at him and not once did he even look their way. Instead he was always looking at you. Can't revive a clan with dude-on-dude action. So you know what? Feel free Gage. Kakashi laughed out loud. In fact, Naruto spluttered and coughed for a brief moment before staring at Kakashi with wide eyes. Dear Kami Kakashi-sensei, don't even joke about that. I don't even want to think about Sasuke being into me like that. Just the thought of that is enough to send chills down my spine. Though it does make a lot of sense if you think about it. Still though, my point stands, I'd rather not think about him being attracted to me like that. He replied with a chuckle. Gage couldn't help but smile along with their banter, even though she didn't know who this Sasuke person was. She expressed gratitude to them for their efforts to lift her spirits. She couldn't help but admire them for doing that, even though she knew it was what they were doing. Wiping the last of the tears from her eyes, she clung to Naruto and kissed his cheek tenderly. Thank you too, for being so sweet and cheering me up like this. You're great people, you know that. Most people wouldn't give two shits about me or what I've been through, but here you two are going out of your way to listen to me and cheer me up and everything, and I just... I can't help but love you guys for it. You remind me of my friends so much. I think I'll always miss them, but I know they'll be safe and I know they'll kill Handsome Jack for me. And I'll make the best of my new life here in this world of yours. I think I'd like to go to Konoha with you guys and see what it's like there. If you'll let me, asked, hoping for permission to tag as well. After a brief exchange of glances and a joint nod, Naruto and Kakashi turned back to face Gage and grinned at her. Kakashi replied, of course you can return with us Gage-chan. I think Tsunade-sama would be more than willing to give you a home in the village, and I'm sure she'd be more than interested in meeting you as well. Jiraiya-sama might be interested in meeting you as well now that I think on it, seeing as he was with Naruto during his training trip when he developed his new powers, so he has more insight on this whole situation than anyone else does. Kakashi said with a chin raised in thought. After a moment, he sighed and shook his head, shrugging. Ah well, the point is, you'd be more than welcome in Konoha, and some very powerful and influential people will be happy to meet you. He replied with a grin on his face. In an attempt to relieve a kink in her back, Gage stretched her arms above her head and leaned back, grinning. Her breasts appeared slightly more prominent and her chest was wonderfully protruded, but Naruto tried not to look. However, when Naruto gave him a glare for being a pervert, Kakashi let himself take a quick glance before turning away. After finishing, she smiled at them both while leaning back on her arms. Sue, what's on the agenda for the day? We doing anything fun? We going anywhere? What's up? Naruto rubbed the back of his head and said, well, we're actually planning to head out today to make our return trip to Konoha. Just trying to get a few things ironed out first and then we'll be making our way back home. That's kinda why we wanted to talk with you before we left. If you wanted to stay here in Suna with Gaara, we couldn't really make you come with us against your will. It was well within your rights to stay here after all, he replied with an informal shrug. With a gentle smile, he explained, even so, I am happy that you mentioned that you would be going back to Konoha with us. You seem like a really nice person and someone I'd be glad to have as a friend. With a smile on her face, Gage extended her hand and lightly stroked his cheek, which was spotted with whiskers. Ah, aren't you just the sweetest? Thank you for being honest with me. I considered staying here with Gaara. He seems like an interesting guy, but he's really not my type. That and I don't really know anybody here. All the people I do know from this world are people from Konoha, so it only makes sense to return to Konoha with you guys, don't you think? She replied with a smile. Naruto nodded in agreement, chuckling a little. True enough. I can't argue with that logic. He concurred. Well, we should probably go ahead and get our things packed up and ready to go. You need any help packing up your things Gage-chan? Replied Naruto. After observing her shake her head no, Naruto nodded and proceeded to gather his belongings and store them in storage scrolls. After finishing, he sat on the bed and briefly considered what his girls might be doing before his thoughts turned to Temari and their amazing kiss. I wonder if Temari will remain here. 3 hours later at Suna's entrance. The group stood at Tsunagaku's entrance, ready to depart for Konohagakure after spending some time saying goodbye at Chiyo's grave. Gaara and Kankuro were in front of them. Temari was supposed to stand with them, but to the surprise of some members of the Konoha group, she was actually going back to Konoha with them. This was because she was going to Konoha to become one of Naruto's fiancés. Gaara made two decisions while staring into Naruto's eyes. He shook his friend's hand first, extending his own. He smiled kindly and said, "Thank you, Naruto, for helping to save my life." Then he frowned at Naruto and tightened his grip on his friend's hand. He said, with a tiny smile on his lips, but if you hurt my sister in any way, I will kill you, friend or not. This caused Naruto to perspire, and he nodded rapidly, demonstrating that he understood the message. Roger that, Gaara. I promise, I won't hurt Temari. She'll be just as precious to me as my other girlfriends are. She already is precious to me, and I'll make sure nothing happens to her. You have my word on that. He reassured his companion. After a brief moment, they hugged and gently patted each other's backs before pulling apart and giving each other a small smile. To each other, they said, I'll miss you. Naruto said, take care of yourself, Gaara. You too, Kankuro. Make sure to look after Gaara as well. I worry about you guys sometimes. I can't help it, you're like brothers to me. He replied honestly. With a smile, Kankuro embraced Naruto. Don't worry man, we'll look after ourselves and be safe. You can count on it. You just be sure to take good care of my sister, alright? I'm going to miss the both of you. Hey, I'm really going to miss her cooking. Gaara and I can't cook worth shit. We kinda relied on her to cook our meals for us every day. Now we've gotta figure something else out. You lucky bastard, you get to eat her cooking now. He laughed. This made Naruto laugh, and he gave Kankuro a back pat before they parted ways. You two will figure something out, I'm sure of it. Just take care of yourselves. He concluded. With a slight but genuine smile, Naruto uttered, we'll see you both later. I love you guys. Having said that, Naruto moved aside to let Temari step forward and bid her brothers farewell, kissing their cheeks and giving them hugs. The Konoha group then started their arduous journey back to Konoha. After 2 days, Konoha. The journey back to Konoha had taken the group surprisingly little time. At some point during their journey, Guy and Lee decided to turn it into a race to see who could return home the quickest, even though they had started out at a civilian pace, albeit an accelerated one. Why did they do this? It was just that they quickly got tired of it and thought they were going much too slowly. In addition, they assumed that, as usual, they would use it as a kind of training exercise. So here they were, back in Konoha, reporting what had transpired during the mission in front of the Hokage. Tsunade spoke up after they had completed their report. Temari nodded, indicating that she would very much like to join as a kunoichi of Konohagakure. It's unfortunate that the Akatsuki managed to capture the Ikibi. Still, I'm glad you managed to recover the Cage. And Temari, you are more than welcome to join our ranks if you so choose. Alright, come see me later to get the details ironed out. Gage, can you please wait outside in the hall for a moment? I need to speak with Yamato and his team alone for a moment. The rest of you are dismissed. Have a good day and make sure to pick up your mission payment on your way out, she said with a grin on her face. With a nod, Gage departed the room, followed by Kakashi and the others, leaving Tsunade alone in the room with Yamato, Naruto, and his girlfriends. With the door shut behind them, Tsunade left the room and started talking, her eyes a little glassy. Naruto-kun, Yamato, I've decided to place a new person on your team. He goes by the name of Sai. Please do your best to get along with him and treat him as one of your own, she responded. Naruto scowled at this and spoke up right away. He said, a little angrily, no. The Granny Tsunade I know wouldn't put some person none of us know and trust on our team out of the blue like this. She made this team because we're familiar with one another and know how to work well together. She wouldn't throw a wrench in that now by adding in an unknown subject to the mix. He continued. At this point, he turned to Yamato and gave Tsunade a discreet nod while whispering to him. Yamato-sensei, I think she might be under a genjutsu of some kind. A powerful one by the looks of it. Yamato gave his pupil a scowl. He initially thought he was being disobedient during the mission, but he knew deep down that Naruto had made the right choice at that particular moment. At the time, he simply didn't want to acknowledge it to himself. It was a little awkward for him to have a rookie, genin, take charge like that because he was the team captain. And now, of all people, he was defying a direct order from his Hokage. Naruto turned to him and said something that made a surprising amount of sense before he could say anything to chastise his charge. A genjutsu. As Yamato turned to face Tsunade, he saw that her eyes appeared glazed over, as though she were in some sort of trance. But it was hardly perceptible. At first glance, her eyes appeared nearly normal. The glazed look in her eyes was only visible if you looked closely enough. With a frown, Yamato raised his hands in a hand seal and yelled, "Release." To Yamato's surprise, Tsunade raised an eyebrow in question as she looked at him, her eyes still glassy. "What are you doing?" she asked inquisitively. Yamato scowled as he whispered back to Naruto, looking down at him. She's definitely under a genjutsu, but it's a powerful one, Naruto. Can one of your girlfriends break it with their magic? He asked. Naruto frowned after considering which of his girlfriends might be able to do so. I don't know. I can ask, but it might be a long shot. We might need to work together and pump almost all of our chakra through her system to break her free of this genjutsu. I might even need to tap into Kyuubi's chakra if we're really unlucky. He replied with a deep sigh. Naruto made the decision to walk over to his girlfriends and tell them what was going on. Hopefully, this would help put an end to the situation because he could tell that they were equally upset about Tsunade trying to force an unknown person on them. Girls, Yamato and I figured out that Granny's under a pretty powerful genjutsu. We're trying to figure out how to break her out of it. Do any of you have any magic that might be able to snap her out of it? He was hoping. After giving it some thought and scratching the back of her neck, Riku turned to frown at Tsunade. I don't know if any of my magic would help, but I do have a dressphere that might do the trick. The psychic dressphere would allow me to connect with her mind and try to fix her up. Want me to give it a try, Naru? She responded with a grin. Naruto nodded, smiling at his fiancé. Naruto cried out, anything's worth a try. I say go for it, Riku Haim. He fervently hoped that Riku would be able to undo the harm done to his beloved Granny Tsunade. The energetic blonde burglar gave a single nod before launching a dressphere into her psychic dressphere. After completing that, she targeted Tsunade and executed a mind link, rapidly entering the Konohagakure village chief's head. Once inside her head, Riku started searching for anything unusual so she could fix up one of Naruto's favorite characters and squash it like a bug. Riku had to acknowledge that it wasn't pretty when she eventually found what she was looking for. This thing was as hideous as sin. 3 tomos were idly spinning around in the center of what appeared to be a black blob with a single red eye. It was staring directly at her. Fortunately, it had not yet begun to move aggressively in her direction. Rather, it appeared inquisitive about her purpose and how she entered the room in the first place. Riku decided to take care of this issue immediately, so she swiftly raised her hand and used her telekinesis power to destroy the unsightly creature. With a sigh of relief at being out of that eerie place, the beautiful young blonde vanished from Tsunade's mindscape and returned to her body as soon as it was eliminated. Riku explained, shuddering in disgust at the thought of that hideous creature, it's done, Naru. She's free now. However, based on what you told me about the Sharingan, I believe that somebody used that on her. Whatever that thing I destroyed had an eye that looked like a Sharingan. When Naruto heard this, he snarled and turned to face Yamato, who was enraged that someone with a Sharingan eye had the audacity to use it on their respected leader. When Tsunade regained consciousness, she glanced at everyone and blinked a few times. What's going on? Granny Tsunade, I need to ask you something very important. Who was it that told you to put this Sai person on our team? Whoever it was used a Sharingan eye to place a very powerful genjutsu on you. Riku here had to delve into your mind to break it, and it wasn't easy. Naruto explained in a tone that was very serious. Tsunade's eyes widened in realization, then narrowed in rage, and she slammed her fist down on her desk, breaking it in two. She scowled as she tried to remember the last thing she remembered about this Sai person. You say he used an implanted Sharingan to place me under a genjutsu. Tsunade scowled angrily as she got a series of nods from everyone in the room with her. Danzo, that rotten bastard, I refused his request to place his little protege on your team and he just wouldn't take no for an answer. That's the last thing I remember about that situation. Then that's grounds for an execution. He's committed treason against his Hokage and most likely stolen a Sharingan from one of the deceased Uchiha without anyone finding out until now. It's time he pays for all of his crimes. She grumbled as she headed toward the door. And if I find out the other elders helped him in any way, they will pay too. Tsunade then escorted the group into the hallway, where she observed Gage standing calmly. The Godime Hokage bowed her head slightly and frowned for a moment. Tsunade started to leave again but stopped after a few steps before turning to look over her shoulder. I apologize for keeping you waiting so long, Gage. Unfortunately, our conversation will have to wait until later. Something urgent has come up that needs to be dealt with immediately. Actually, you might as well come along. Perhaps we can have our conversation as we walk, she replied with a grin. You might be able to help us after all. Gage fell into step next to Tsunade, grinning and nodding enthusiastically. Sure thing. I'm always willing to lend a hand or two, she exclaimed, grinning and laughing as she pumped both fists toward the air. With a mad smile spreading across her face, she remarked, "Death Trap's always willing to shed a few pints of blood too. From our enemies, of course." This made Tsunade perspire, but after a moment she couldn't help but smile. "You know, I think I'm going to like you, Gage-chan. Tell me, what's your stance on perverts?" Well, Gage started. Danzo's home. A short time later, Yamato, Tsunade, and the others had reached Danzo's modest home. Knowing that the old bastard probably wouldn't be willing to lay down and die the way he ought to have years ago, they were all ready for a fight. Even if only to himself, Yamato had to acknowledge that he was eager to put this rotten old bastard in his place, which was 6 feet underground, because he had a personal grudge against him. Tsunade took a step forward and chose to knock on the door very softly. That is to say, she punched it straight off its hinges, sending it flying through the wall on the other side and into the building beyond. They entered his home and saw Danzo getting up from his couch in the living room, accompanied by the two elders, Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Utatame, who appeared to be terrified for their lives. Choosing to exercise mercy, Tsunade posed a single query. She hoped they would deny it. "Have you two played any part in any of Danzo's schemes?" she asked. Choosing to speak first, Homura shook his head while a tiny drop of perspiration trickled down his cheek. Lying through his teeth, he said, "En no Hokage-sama. Not at all." Kaharu, however, gave him a quick glance before meeting the Hokage's eyes directly. "Yes, Hokage-sama, we both have. Numerous times. However, we tried to caution him against doing some of the things he's gone through with, but he never listens to us. Danzo's a warmonger through and does whatever he wants, claiming it's all in the name of Konoha, when it's really only benefiting him. If you'd like, I will give myself up to you and come in peacefully, giving you whatever information I can on all of our past dealings with Danzo, all of his crimes that I know of, and even our involvement with him. All I ask in exchange is to be allowed to live the rest of my days with my family in peace and solitude. Is that acceptable, Lady Tsunade?" Tsunade gave a nod. She nodded to Gage and smiled when she took out her sniper rifle and fired a single round into Homura's skull, directly between his eyes, faster than he could blink. "Agreed, Lady Kaharu. As for you two," she said. Yamato, in the meantime, performed a series of hand seals and yelled, "Wood release, 4-pillar prison technique." Just before a wooden prison erupted out of the earth, enclosing Danzo and imprisoning him inside. His wrists and legs were swiftly bound with shackles, preventing him from using any jutsu. Danzo was enraged. He tried to use his implanted Sharingan to command Yamato to release him while glaring at him, but he was unable to concentrate enough chakra into his eye to accomplish anything. Looking to the side, he discovered that Naruto had attached some sort of seal tag to the prison's side, which was the cause of this. He snarled and started cursing them. "You rotten bastards! Don't you know what I am? I'm a patriot. Everything I've ever done was for the good of Konoha. You don't know what you're doing. Before he could continue his tirade, Tsunade came over and tore off all of Danzo's bandages, exposing his hideous body to everyone. But seeing his arm and her grandfather's face on it was what truly made her sick. The sight of all the Sharingan eyes grafted into the arm, however, was what truly disturbed them all. As they looked to Kaharu for clarification, they noticed that she looked down and away while using her left arm to hold her right arm. He played the Uchiha clan like a fiddle. Peace talks were going well, but Danzo wouldn't have any of it. He craved power and wanted their Sharingan eyes for himself. But more than that, he felt the Uchiha clan was far too dangerous and claimed they would betray the village, regardless of how loyal they were. Shisui-san had plans to use his Mangekyo Sharingan to convince his father not to stage a coup. But Danzo killed Shisui with his root and stole his eye for himself. That's the eye you see in his eye socket. All because of the Sharingan ability Koto Amatsukami. Danzo orchestrated the entire thing. He's the entire reason the Uchiha clan was wiped out down to every last man, woman, and child except for Sasuke and Itachi. All in the name of obtaining more power for himself. He claims it was for the good of Konoha, like usual, but it was really all for himself, as usual. She continued by saying, "What a selfish, horrible, brute of a man." Tsunade was done listening. She reached through the cage's bars, grabbed Danzo's mutilated arm, and pulled violently, tearing it off before repeatedly striking him over the head with it. After shouting, "You are sick. What gives you the right to do such things, you rotten bastard?" She threw the arm away and proceeded to gouge out his Sharingan eye through the bars once more. She was tempted to crush it as she looked at it in the palm of her hand, but she decided against it. She had an idea while staring at Naruto and decided to discuss it with him later. She removed a scroll for the time being and sealed the eye inside for protection. They concluded that there was no more reason to keep Danzo alive at this point. Therefore, before Danzo could say another goodbye, Tsunade reached through the bars, grabbed his head by both sides, and swiftly snapped his neck with a vicious twist, causing his head to spin around until it appeared as though it would pop off. Danzo was dead after that. Naruto retrieved his seal tag, Yamato let go of his technique, and Danzo's body fell to the ground in a heap. Kaharu was led out of the building by Tsunade, who smiled at her and started a conversation as she took her by the arm. While the others in the house were left to deal with Danzo and Homura's remains, she would take the village elder to Teni, where the woman would provide as much information as possible about Danzo and his activities, as well as her own involvement in them. What a sloppy job. As they continued their work, Yamato grinned at Naruto. I have to say, Naruto, you have a good eye. At first I thought you were being insubordinate when you responded to Tsunade, but to recognize a genjutsu of that caliber based on your intimate knowledge of her due to your personal relationship with her, I must admit I'm impressed. Good job, he replied, truly impressed. And, I'm sorry about before, you were right to do what you did. I didn't mean to accuse you of being insubordinate. I want you to know that I trust in your judgment, Naruto. I hope we can become friends in time and work well together, he said with a grin on his face. Naruto gave his team captain a gentle smile and extended his hand for a handshake. Thank you, Yamato-sensei. That means a lot to me. And again, I am sorry for behaving the way I did during the mission. I did what I felt was best at the time. I wasn't trying to undermine your authority in any way. And, for what I said at the hotel to you, I'm sorry. I was upset at the time because of what you were saying and, well, things got out of hand and I'm sorry. I hope we can become good friends and team members with enough time as well, Yamato-sensei, he said as they exchanged greetings. The Nightingale the following day. Early this morning, Sakura was located by Temari and Naruto's other girlfriends, who invited her to join them for breakfast. Since they intended to speak with her today, they made the decision to start early so that Tsunade wouldn't give them any tasks or assignments for the day. Thus, they had all made the decision to visit the Nightingale, one of the village's most well-known eateries. Sakura was understandably anxious in their company, but even if only slightly, her anxiety was reduced by seeing Temari, a familiar face. What did you want with me? If you're here about what I did to Naruto in the past, I'm sorry. I really am. And if you're upset about me making a move on your boyfriend, miss, I'm sorry, I didn't know at the time. She blurted out after getting her food and drink, though, with a sad frown on her face. She was still furious about her lost opportunity in spite of herself. Sakura shook her head as Meru gave her a charming smile. She winked and said, well, you're partly right, but there's something you should know first. Naruto's been inducted into the CRA. We're all his girlfriends now. And, we wanted you to know that Naruto still cares for you. He may have moved on from you, but at the same time, he still has lingering feelings for you. Does that make sense to you? She inquired, continuing to smile at the woman with pink hair before addressing her. Sakura blinked a few times as her mind went over this information. She looked pleadingly at the group in front of her after a moment, and a megawatt smile came over her face. With hope, she said, are you saying what I think you're saying? Blake shook her head and raised a hand. She took a bite of her food and said, not quite yet, Sakura. We're here to talk to you about the opportunity first. She swallowed and narrowed her eyes as she glanced at Sakura. First things first. If we were to give you a chance at being with him, you aren't to hit him ever again. Even if he says or does something you think is stupid or you don't like, you are not to hit him. Do you understand me? She said with the greatest sternness. At this, Sakura winced and gave a slow nod. I understand. I know I did that a lot in the past, and I hate myself for it. Now that I've trained under Tsunade-sama and learned how to use Master's Strength technique, I know I could really hurt him if I were to hit him now. I know I have a bad temper, but I promise that if you give me a chance to be with him, I won't ever hurt him again. I love him. I love him so much. I just want to be with him. More than I've ever wanted anything. Sakura spoke with tears in her eyes. Riku scowled and shook her head as she saw Sakura raise her hands to shield her eyes as she started to cry. There was still something to ask, but she couldn't help but feel sorry for the poor girl. She frowned as she returned to her meal, anticipating a response. That's another thing we need to ask you about, Sakura. You used to fawn over Sasuke and truly believed you were in love with him. You seem like you genuinely love Naruto now, but what made you change while he was gone from the village? She asked. After hiccuping and wiping her eyes with the backs of her hands, Sakura turned to face everyone and grinned slightly. Master helped open my eyes. Sasuke was just a childish crush. When I saw what he did to Naruto, when I saw my dear teammate in the hospital like that, that's when I began to hate Sasuke. Naruto was our teammate and Sasuke tried to fucking kill him. Also he could go to that bastard Orochimaru. She screamed, clenching her fist. Sakura inhaled deeply, paused to finish her meal, and then resumed her conversation. As for my feelings for Naruto, well, Master helped open my eyes. He was always there for me. He made me feel special. When I was feeling down, he always found a way to cheer me up. Believe it or not, I remember that he was my first true friend before I met Inouen. Things changed. I remember that when push came to shove, I always counted on Naruto to come to my rescue rather than Sasuke. I knew Naruto would always be there for me. I knew Sasuke didn't care enough. Shaking her head, Sakura glanced at her hands and cracked a smile. Naruto always found a way to make me laugh and make me smile. He just had that gift, you know. He's such a good guy and I can't help but love him for being, well, him. She clarified. Sakura let out a gentle sigh and turned to face Naruto's girlfriends, grinning as the tears began to fall once more. I wasn't even aware of how deep my feelings for him were until Master sat me down and talked with me about Naruto. She could see how Naruto's absence from the village was affecting me. And they do say that absence makes the heart grow fonder. Sakura laughed. And when I saw him upon his return to the village, Okami, my heart was racing. I wanted to pull him into a kiss and never let him go. I wanted him so bad. It hurt to find out that he was taken. Sakura paused to reflect, then pushed her chair back and knelt on the floor, prostrating herself in front of them, looking into each of their eyes individually. Please, I beg of you, allow me to be with Naruto. I love him so very much. He's the only man I'll ever love and I don't know what I'd do without him in my life. The girls, who had just finished eating, were startled by this abrupt action and hurried to Sakura to assist her in standing up. Please Sakura, you don't need to do this. If you're this serious about being with him, if you're this in love with him, then we can't deny you your chance. Come with us and we'll help you talk to Naruto. I'm sure he'll be happy to see you. Riku said with a gentle smile. Before the large group of girls left the restaurant to head back home to talk to their shared boyfriend about letting Sakura join their expanding family, Yang left some cash on the table to cover the cost of their meal. 20 minutes later, the Uzumaki Namikaze estate. Sakura and his girlfriends were sitting in front of Naruto, who was looking at them with curiosity. He was naturally a little taken aback when he saw Sakura among their numbers because Gage had shown him her robot death trap before they arrived and asked if they could speak with him. He chose to ask them a question after glancing around at them. Not that I'm not happy to see all of you, but what's Sakura-chan doing here? With a hand on her fiancé's thigh, Riku approached and sat next to him. She explained, putting her fingers together and giggling a little uncomfortably, Naruto, we had a talk with Sakura about you. We informed her that you've been placed in the CRA. We also informed her that you still have feelings for her. Naruto's eyes were wide as he gazed at her. However, Meru interrupted him before he could say anything. Naruto, don't get upset. We love you and we want you to be happy. And, we were concerned about Sakura as well. We feel she deserves to be as happy with you as we are. So, we talked with her and we decided in the end that she's worthy to be with you. So, will you accept her into your life as a member of our family? She asked in the hope that he wouldn't disagree. Before Naruto could respond, Sakura chose to be a little brave and approached him, swaying her hips slightly and sitting on his lap before leaning in close and giving him a seductive smile while bringing her face close to his. Before planting kisses on his neck, jawline, and whisker marks, she said, "Come on Naru-kun, say yes. Pretty please, I promise you won't regret it. I love you so much. I really, truly do." Naruto gently grasped Sakura's chin and turned her head so she was staring into his eyes while he laughed softly. He moved his hands down to the pinket's ass and squeezed it firmly after leaning forward and planting a fiery, passionate kiss on her lips. Sakura's firm and perky butt has always been Naruto's favorite, so he was pleased when she squealed a little before moaning and intensifying the kiss, even inserting her tongue. They parted ways after a brief moment, and Sakura burst out laughing. She put her forehead against his and remarked, that was amazing. It was everything I had hoped it would be. Sakura remarked, you're amazing Naru-kun. I really, truly love you darling. Gazing into Sakura's eyes, Naruto also grinned at her. With a gentle smile, he said, I love you as well, Sakura. Just as I love all of you. He smiled slyly and said, now, why don't we head out and do something fun? I say we enjoy a good prank. We haven't pulled one yet since returning to the village and I think it's high time we pull one girls. What do you say? Riku nodded in agreement and smiled. She giggled enthusiastically and said, ooh, I can't wait. I say we do it. She agreed. Blake and Temari were among the other girls who nodded in agreement with him. Sakura, on the other hand, gazed at everyone with wide eyes before turning to face Naruto, who was grinning curiously at her eyes. She smiled and nodded at him, letting go of a sigh. She rubbed her chin thoughtfully and remarked, I'll help too. This might actually be pretty fun. And, considering your past pranks, this might actually prove to be good training now that I think about it. She shrugged and nodded again, then smiled at Naruto and stepped off his lap. She laughed as she exclaimed, let's do it, Naru-kun. 1 hour later, Konoha streets. Store owners and other entrepreneurs were frantically yelling incoherently about their stores being vandalized in some terrible manner. What was the reason for this specific commotion? Paint bombs had detonated and splattered the walls and merchandise in almost every store, or at least every one that had previously expelled Naruto or wronged him in some way. Furthermore, squirrels had been let loose and allowed to cause chaos in a few stores. In addition, a weird and awful odor was detected in other stores, but no one was able to identify the source or pinpoint what it was. They had no means of proving it, but they all knew who the criminal was. Ultimately, no one witnessed him carrying out the deed. He had done nothing, but there was no evidence. Even so, he was laughing uncontrollably the entire time, finding immense joy in the events unfolding in front of him. His girlfriends, too, were laughing heartily at the whole thing. However, one person was suffering from a terrible headache as a result of the entire ordeal. Tsunade sat in her office and watched the chaos that was currently occurring in the village below. She hung her head, massaged her temples, and complained bitterly to herself about all the complaining she would now have to do and the amount of paperwork she would have to complete. Damn it Naruto, why do you do things like this? Office of the Hokage. Later that day. In front of Tsunade, Shizune, and Taunton stood Naruto, his girlfriends including Temari and Sakura, Gage, and Yamato, all of whom were perplexed by their unexpected summons. The chubby blonde Hokage spoke up before anyone could ask the question. I'm sure you're all wondering why I summoned you to my office. Before you ask, no, it has nothing to do with the pranking spree that I'm sure you committed. Though I have to ask, why would you do such a thing Naruto? Was it really necessary? With a raised eyebrow, Naruto crossed his arms over his chest. The Godime Hokage couldn't help but sigh as he realized that either he didn't actually do it or they assisted in the pranking spree. Tsunade turned to face his girlfriends and saw that they were all nodding. And who says I'm the one that did it? Did you find any proof that I did anything? I was with my girlfriends the entire time. It wasn't a good thing, either way. Tsunade pinched the bridge of her nose and sighed to herself, then shook her head angrily. Never mind, that's not important right now, she replied. With a quiet sigh, Tsunade gazed into each of their eyes one by one before closing them and grinning to herself. I kind of checked on you using Sensei's crystal ball earlier to make sure you were doing okay and saw what was going on in your estate. And I've been thinking about this ever since. I know it might be a bit odd to add more to your numbers, but considering you're a big group already, would you like to add Temari, Sakura, and Gage to your team? Sakura is without a team of her own, and I assure you that she is a wonderful medic. She also has my chakra-enhanced strength, which will prove a huge boon to your forces. Temari, I'm sure you already know very well what she is capable of. And Gage, you've already seen firsthand what she is capable of. But she hasn't quite shown everything yet from what I've gathered. I'm rather curious about this death trap robot she's talked about. But yes, I do believe she'll make a fine addition to your team. So, what do you say? Do you accept? Naruto initially wanted to make a joke and call Tsunade a pervert, but he was aware that would not be well received. However, As she talked, he found himself liking the idea of Temari and Sakura joining the team. Then he considered Gage, and even though he didn't know her well, he felt she would also be a good addition. She definitely had the firepower down, but she would need some serious training to be able to keep up with the team in terms of speed and endurance. For now, at least, she did. She didn't have infinite ammunition, as far as he could tell, but thankfully she had enough to last her a very long time. He chose to join in on the conversation after noticing his girlfriends and Yamato talking to each other out of the corner of his eye. They eventually broke up their huddle and grinned at Tsunade. For the group, Yamato said, "We accept Hokage-sama. We would be glad to have them on the team," in the hopes that she would temporarily remove them from missions so they could train and become acquainted with each other's skills. He explained, each of their skills would be a most welcome addition to the team. However, we will need to take time to hash out our teamwork and get acclimatized to one another's abilities. Tsunade gave a sympathetic nod, but she had to break their illusion. Unfortunately, your team is being sent to Tenchi Bridge to meet with Sasori's spy in 2 days' time. I want you to take these 2 days to train and get used to each other as much as possible. Do whatever it takes to familiarize yourselves with one another and hash out your teamwork, because I want you to be as cohesive a unit as you can be before you leave here in 2 days' time. When you return from this mission, I promise I'll give you the time you need to train," she said in the hope that Yamato would comprehend her standpoint. The team captain gave the Hokage a salute after letting out a quiet sigh and giving a few resigned nods. "I understand, Hokage-sama. It shall be done. Come team, let us head to training ground number 3 and begin. We've only got 2 days and I'm going to make sure to train us all into the ground. We're only going to take breaks for lunch, dinner, and restroom breaks. Is that understood?" he asked in the hope that they would comprehend. When they were gone, Shizune scowled slightly as he turned to face Lady Tsunade. She expressed genuine concern for the group, saying, "It's good that he's serious about this, but isn't he taking this a little too far? He can't push them that hard. They'll collapse from exhaustion at that rate." Tsunade shook her head and sighed. "It's not our place to intervene, Shizune. They're just going to have to deal with it and tough it out. Yamato wants to make sure they're prepared for whatever life throws at them. He wouldn't be doing this if they weren't on such a tight schedule. Once things have calmed down some and he's allowed the time he so desperately needs to train his team, then he'll start taking it a bit easier on them. Do you understand?" Shizune sighed softly, nodded slowly, and peered out the window. She clarified, "I do. I just can't help but worry though. Naruto and the others were very important to her. She was naturally inclined to do so." Konoha main gate 2 days later. Yamato's training was cruel, and Naruto and the others had to acknowledge this. They were still sore and even a little tired after a restful night's sleep and soaking in the estate's hot springs. Even though their only task was to meet with a spy and capture him so they could bring him back for questioning, they were still ready and willing to go kick some ass on this mission. When Yamato eventually showed up and gestured for them to follow him, the group let out collective yawns of relief. Additionally, it was about damn time. For the past 30 minutes or so, they had been waiting for him. Now was the time to go catch a spy. In order to find Orochimaru and retrieve Sasuke, they hoped to obtain the necessary information. It was irrelevant now whether he was dead or alive. The rights of a traitor were non-existent. He was free to kill one of them if he resisted or attempted to do so. As they headed toward Kusagaku's Tenchi Bridge, Team Yamato was moving quickly. Their stamina had fortunately improved significantly as a result of all their training, allowing them to travel farther between stops without needing to rest as frequently. However, Yamato wasn't exactly a hardass and made the decision to spend the night at a hot springs resort in a nearby town at the end of the first day of travel. The girls were relieved to be able to rest their tired bodies as soon as they stepped into the hot spring. This was just what they needed after Yamato had been pushing them so hard for the last 2 days. It would be very beneficial for their aching bodies to rest and unwind in a hot spring. Riku decided to ask Gage a question while he was staring at her. "Say, Gage," she began, "what's it like where you're from? We still don't know all that much about you, so I'm kinda curious." After blinking, Gage folded her arm under her bust and cocked her head slightly, trying to think of the best way to respond to that query. She shrugged her shoulders and chose to be bluntly honest after a moment. "Well, I kinda ran away from home, so I can't really tell you much about that place anymore. I was kinda making the planet of Pandora my new home. I became a vault hunter, but I think I already told you guys about that," she continued. The redhead grinned and carried on when her friends nodded on her. Thing is, Pandora's kind of a crazy place. Tons of bandits roaming around, lots of crazy wildlife like skags, raks, bullymongs, freshers, etc. No matter where you went, you had to fight to survive. The only safe place was Sanctuary, and even then Handsome Jack and Hyperion were trying to wipe that place off the face of the planet. She clarified. Gage waved the others away with her fleshy arm as they gave her a sad look. In order to prevent her metal arm from becoming wet and breaking down, the Vault Hunter had left it in the dressing room. Hey, don't look so glum people. I had a lot of fun. Death Trap and I got to meet some pretty interesting people and we got to kill a lot of bad guys too. It was a win-win. I was one kick-ass Vault Hunter and I was proud of it. Still am, actually. Us Vault Hunters were looked at like we were heroes by the people of Pandora. Made me feel extra special, she said before starting to laugh. Hey, can you imagine? Me, a hero, yeah. At this point, Meru scowled and waded over to embrace Gage, placing her head on her bosom. You're thinking about Roland again, aren't you, Gage? I'm sorry. He was a wonderful friend to you and for you to have lost him like that, it's just so horrible. That jerk Handsome Jack will pay for what he did, I'm sure of it. Hopefully Naruto will find a way to connect to all of our worlds soon so we can check on our friends and loved ones again and make sure they're all safe and sound. I know that I, for one, want to make sure that Dart and the others kicked some major butt and saved the world. She yelled. Gage gave Meru a hug in return, giggling a little. Silently, she said, thanks Meru. If Naruto finds a way to connect to my world, I just want to check on them to see if they killed that monster. Handsome Jack keeps calling himself a hero, and my friends and me the villains. He's a delusional jackass. No hero would do the kinds of things he's done. If I get the chance, I'll fire a damn rocket into his face and watch him go kaboom. For sure, she screamed as she fled from Meru and raised her fist in the air. Riku nodded her head in comprehension and giggled a little. You know that Naruto and the rest of us would gladly help you, Gage. Just as we'd do the same for any one of us sitting here now. After giving the insane inventor a nod, she closed her eyes, pushed her chest out slightly, and leaned back against the hot spring's edge. I know, and I appreciate it. You guys are just as awesome as my buddies back in my universe, she replied. As she opened one eye and smiled teasingly, she said conspiratorially, and hey, that Naruto of yours is pretty cute. I bet he's fun to tease, huh? Blake folded her arms across her chest, huffed in frustration, and narrowed her suspicious eyes at Gage. You're not going to try and get with him too, are you, Gage? Because you barely even know him yet. Gage gave Blake a sly smile and shook her head no. Nah, I'm not about to make a move on your man. The most I'm likely to do is flirt with him from time to time. If I take an interest in him down the road, I'll let you lovely ladies know first, she replied, telling them the truth. At this point, Temari couldn't help but laugh and glanced at everyone before turning back to Gage. Trust me when I say this, he'll find a way to charm himself into your heart whether he intends to or not. Just spending time with him and getting to know him as a person is enough to make you fall for the guy, she said with conviction. Gage shrugged her shoulders, closed her eyes, and gazed up at the sky. If it happens, it happens. I wouldn't mind either way. Besides, I'm only 15 years old. I've got plenty of time left to find myself a nice guy and settle down. Sakura shook her head and scowled at this. In this world, at your age, you're pretty much counted as an adult already. Just wearing the headband of Konohagakure now means you're counted as an adult in the eyes of the village. You can legally marry and have kids now if you so wanted. Gage was told by her. So if you did happen to fall in love with someone in our village, you'd be more than welcome to settle down with them and start a family. I assume that would have been difficult to do back where you're from. The red-haired mechanic shook her head and laughed. You have no idea. Pandora was a mess. A real fucking mess. Toilets out in the open where people could see you. A perverted little claptrap robot that wouldn't leave you or other people the fuck alone and who constantly annoyed people to no end. No private bedrooms to sleep in and the beds were screwed up too. The people were assholes, and for some reason a bunch of them were always pounding or knocking on doors and walls. It didn't make any damn sense, but it was annoying as hell. I could go on, but suffice it to say, Pandora is not the kind of place where you'd want to raise a family. You'd want to go off-world for that kind of business, she clarified. The other girls exchanged curious glances before turning back to Gage. Sakura asked the group. They kept knocking on doors and walls. Was there some reason for this, or? Gage grinned sheepishly as she shook her head and glanced around at the group of women. Nope, no reason at all. For them, it seemed like it was just something to do. Pretty stupid and strange, I know, but that's what they chose to do with their lives. Like, hey, what do you wanna do today, Fred? Oh, I'm not sure, Tom. Let's go hammer Dora today, shall we? Of course. I haven't pounded on wall B in a long time, so I'll go pound on it after you do that. All right, Tom, go ahead and enjoy yourself with that. Gage threw her hand in the air, splattering water all over the place. Yeah, it just didn't make any damn sense. She exclaimed. See you later. The other girls all started to perspire at this, but they finally grinned at Gage because they thought she needed to get this off her chest before she blew up. Sakura remarked, well, look on the bright side, Gage-chan. At least you won't have to deal with that mess anymore. You're here with us now and I'm sure you'll find that this world's a lot better than what you've described. I'm sure you'll like it here. The Pinkett laughed. Gage nodded and waved her hand around with a bright smile. Hey, I already love it here. It's so green and beautiful and just all around great here. Plus, it kinda helps that there's some great eye candy here, she said with a smirk. I'm so looking forward to the chance to kill bad guys too. And I promise, me and my buddy Deathtrap will make sure none of those Akatsuki goons harm Naruto. He's too darn cute to be taken by them, damn it. Temari shook her head and sighed. You really like calling Naruto eye candy, don't you, Gage-chan? If you keep this up, he might get the wrong impression and think you're genuinely interested in him. The redhead raised an eyebrow and glanced at the other women seated beside her. Gage walked over to Sakura, leaned in close, and started to slowly run her hand up and down her side before caressing her butt. Hey, who said I was only talking about Naruto? You all make some fine eye candy as well. I'm into women as well. Or did you not realize that? Like for instance, you are absolutely gorgeous, Sakura. A fine, pert posterior and breasts that look just right on a girl of your size. Plus those lips, you make me just want to kiss you, she joked. At this point, Gage turned to Riku and waded toward her, reaching her and gently fondling one of her breasts, causing the ebullient thief to groan a little at her touch. She started by saying, and you, Riku, are simply delectable. You're so energetic and full of life. And these breasts of yours, oh mama. The blonde thief then let out another erotic moan as she moved her head down and flicked the nipple with her tongue, raising Riku's breast slightly. That was fun. Gage let go of Riku's breast and turned to face the other women, laughing hysterically at their startled looks. Before leaving the hot spring, she winked and said, see what I mean now? I'm bi. Men and women, I love 'em both equally. So don't be surprised if I come onto you lovely ladies too. The other girls could only watch Gage go until she was no more visible. They all had matching blushes on their faces as they gazed at each other after she had left. Actually, because of what had happened with her and Gage, Riku's was slightly more noticeable. Recalling Gage's touch on her body, Sakura's blush slightly deepened and she said hesitantly, well, that was something. Riku shook her head and flushed a little more. Confused by what had just happened to her, she said, I think I need my Naru tonight. I need to cuddle. I feel so embarrassed right now. Meru shook her head and giggled. You'd better hope Captain Yamato doesn't have a problem with that then, Riku. He's been pretty strict on Naruto since becoming our team captain, so who knows? Riku clenched her fist in front of her face and snarled. If he tries to prevent me from cuddling with my Naru tonight, he'll get a swift kick to the balls for it. Nobody stops me from clinging to my Naru. Sakura blinked and gave Riku a startled look before turning to face Meru and the others. Did Jiraiya-sama ever try to prevent her from cuddling with Naruto-kun before? Tawa nodded her head and laughed at this. Once, and he regretted doing so for a long time after. Riku went berserk on him in her berserker dress sphere and pounded his nuts repeatedly for even daring to say she couldn't cuddle with her darling Naru. Temari smiled and gave Riku a newfound respect before making a fist with her hand. Riku bumped her fist against Temari's while giggling. Way to go, sister. Way to make that pervert pay for getting in the way of some Naru-kun snuggle time. Temari shouted. In the meantime, the men sighed. As Naruto slid into the hot spring and allowed the warm water to soothe his aching body, he couldn't help but sigh with relief. He might recover quickly, but after everything he'd been through recently, he still felt sore. The blonde gave him a quick glance before turning to face the wall that divided the hot spring's two sides when Yamato slid in beside him. Yamato asked, "Wondering how your fiancés are doing, Naruto?" With a cunning smile, he added, "Or do you wish you could have joined them for some mixed bathing perhaps?" The blonde with the whiskers blushed at this, shook his head quickly to push the naughty pictures away, and then met Yamato's almond eyes. No, Yamato-sensei. I'm just curious about what they're talking about over there is all. I guess I'm just lonely without them, you know." With a sigh, Yamato slowly nodded his head. "I suppose that makes sense. If it helps though, you can talk to me. I'm here and I'm willing to listen to whatever you have to say. So if you have something troubling you that you want to get off your chest, feel free to talk to me about it, Naruto." Naruto gave his team captain a small smile and slowly nodded his head. "Thank you, Yamato-sensei. I think I'll take you up on that offer," he replied. The young blonde confessed, "There is something troubling me actually." With a cunning smirk, Yamato asked, "Oh, whatever could be troubling our resident prankster king?" Naruto chuckled a little at the moniker and went on. "It has to do with the CRA actually. I wanted nothing to do with it at first, and now I'm with 7 women. 7, he yelled. I'm not sure if I can make them all happy. I care about them and love them all, but what if one of them feels neglected or one of them gets jealous because they think I'm spending more time with one of the girls than the rest of them? Or. With a kind smile, Yamato placed his hands on Naruto's shoulders. He calmly said, "Breathe, Naruto. Just breathe. Calm yourself down. Do these women love you?" The strange question made Naruto blink, but he nodded his head in agreement. I'm pretty sure they do. I know Riku does for sure, and I think the others do, but..." Yamato shook his head and gave Naruto a forceful forehead flick that caused him to clutch at his head and wince in agony. "No buts, Naruto. They are all deeply in love with you. Nothing will stop them from loving you. No matter what happens, they'll stay with you through thick and thin. They want to be with you because they love you deeply and dearly. And they all care deeply for each other as well. If they didn't care for one another, then your little harem that you've built for yourself would never work out in a million years. But because they care for and understand one another, they can work out any little problems that may arise between themselves in a peaceful way and still remain friends. Though from what I've seen, they're as close as sisters. I think you'll be just fine, Naruto. So don't doubt yourself again. Okay." The young Uzumaki smiled at Yamato, hugged him, and nodded in gratitude. "Thanks, Yamato-sensei. I really appreciate it." He climbed out and went back to the dressing room, saying, "No problem, Naruto. Now, we should probably get out. We don't want to stay in here too long after all." Before he climbed out to go get dressed and dried off, the blonde with the whiskers stayed for a little while longer, thinking about his girls. Later that evening, a knock on the door interrupted Naruto and Yamato as they were getting ready for bed. After exchanging glances and shrugging, Yamato went to open the door and saw Riku standing there with a blanket and pillow. With his arms folded across his chest, Yamato raised an eyebrow and said, "And what, exactly, do you think you're doing, Riku?" Riku sulked at Yamato and briefly glanced at her fiancé before turning back to Yamato. "I want to sleep with my Naru. Please, Captain Yamato, don't keep us apart." Yamato eyed the two of them and scowled before glaring at Riku. "You wouldn't be trying to have sex with him while on a mission, now would you?" Riku jumped back, tried to protect herself with her pillow, and thrashed around, screaming in terror. "Don't do that, Captain Yamato. I just want to cuddle with my Naru. It's really hard to sleep without having Naru by my side. Besides, why would we try to make love with you in the room? That'd be kind of creepy. No offense intended, but I don't want anyone watching me when Naruto and I go squeaky squeaky in the beddy weddy." By this point, Naruto was flushed and had attempted to hide from Yamato's eyes by hiding under his blanket. Yamato, however, couldn't resist giving Riku a deadpan look. "Beddy weddy." The wood user simply sighed and shook his head when Riku nodded enthusiastically while wearing a radiant smile. Before going back to his bedroll to sleep, he said, "Whatever. Just come in already. If you want to cuddle together, I'll permit it. Just don't do anything more than that, alright? I'd like to get some sleep tonight." With a cheer, Riku entered the room. She rushed over to Naruto and climbed into bed with him, putting her pillow next to his and pulling her blanket over them as she closed the door behind her. She cuddled up to him and exclaimed, "I love you, my Naru. I just couldn't sleep without you." Naruto would have responded, but he couldn't help but glance down at his girlfriend's breasts while he was staring at her in her robe. He quickly looked back into her eyes after blushing deeply, and he knew she had caught him right away. He said, I love you too, sweetheart. Please don't tease me. Riku, giggling, had a cunning idea and leaned in close, nibbling on his ear as she started to caress his crotch through his robe with one foot. Did you enjoy seeing my breasts like that, Naru? Do you like what I'm doing now? I bet you'd like to do more, wouldn't you? She whispered after a moment of this. In an attempt to stifle a moan, Naruto squinted his eyes shut and covered his mouth with one hand. He eventually slipped a hand under his girlfriend's robe and under her underwear because he was sick of his fiancée's teasing. She nearly gasped when he started running a finger up and down her slit, but Naruto's fiery kiss took her breath away. When Yamato saw this happening, he sighed and shook his head angrily. I swear, teenagers and their hormones. Before they get too far, I'd better stop them. Silently, he thought as he got out of bed again and walked toward it. The 19-year-old woman nibbled on her fiancé's lower lip before pulling on it slightly as she reached into his robes to grasp his manhood. She leaned in and whispered to him once more, letting go of his lip. The vivacious thief gave him another kiss, this time with all the passion she could muster, saying, I want you so bad right now, Naru. She pulled apart and kept pumping his cock while grinning at him. Let's do it. The risk of being caught just makes it that much more excit. Before Riku could continue, she happened to look up and noticed Yamato, wearing his frightening face, hovering over them. Riku shivered and curled up against her fiancé, screaming in horror. Kill it with fire, make it go away, she screamed, clutching her lover and pointing at Yamato. After Yamato scared her, Riku's hold on his dick tightened into a vice grip, causing Naruto to scream in agony. He was flailing around, trying to pry Riku's hand off his privates while glaring up at Yamato and crying. He cried out in a panic, why sensei? Why'd you have to scare her? Little Naru might never work right again after this. After realizing what she had just done, Riku let go of her fiancé's cock and tried to massage it to ease the pain, even though Yamato was observing them. However, this only made Naruto hard again. There, little Naru. You'll be okay. I'm so sorry for hurting you. In frustration, Yamato shook his head and grimaced. Yamato sighed as Riku turned to face him while continuing to rub her fiancé's dick. Riku, stop. Just stop. I want the two of you to go to sleep and stop fornicating. Naruto, you'll be fine. Your penis isn't broken. Riku, it said. Before going back to his bedroll to sleep, he said, just go to sleep. He hoped, anyway. Leaning in close and whispering to her fiancé, the attractive thief smirked as she met his eyes. She started to tease him by nipping at his ear once more. Did you hear that, Naru? He doesn't want us fornicating. I guess that just means we'll have to wait until we're alone or he's out of the room then, huh, my darling? I can't wait for you much longer. Gazing into his fiancé's eyes, the blonde Jinchuriki flushed intensely. He confessed, feeling a little embarrassed by his admission. Are you sure we're ready for such a huge step, Riku-chan? I'm a little nervous. After giving him a brief scowl, Riku gave him a tender peck on the lips. She leaned in, pressed her forehead to his, and smiled sweetly at him. She kissed him once more and started to rub his cock slowly while whispering in his ear, I promise you that I'll give you the time of your life if you just open yourself up to it. Naru, I want to give myself to you completely. I'm ready, but if you're nervous or you don't feel ready yet, I won't push you into it. I want us both to feel comfortable with it before we take that next step in our relationship. But, Naruto glanced at Yamato, blushing fiercely, then looked into Riku's eyes and whispered back. He begged, Riku-chan, stop. He kissed her to stop himself from whimpering pathetically when she refused to take her hand off his member or stop her ministrations. He then gave her a kind smile while meeting her eyes. In an attempt to prevent his lady love from practically raping him while Yamato was present, he made a vow. Okay already. I promise that when we return to Konoha, I'll try to make some time for us to be alone together, okay? Riku let go of her lover's cock and gave him another tender kiss on the lips while giggling joyfully. Good boy, I expect you to rock my world once we're back home. Got it, Buster? Asked she. With a sigh, Naruto slowly nodded his head in surrender. Yes, darling, but I thought you weren't. Riku grinned at him while pressing her finger to his lips. Up. No, Naru, I won't be having any complaints now. A woman always gets what she wants in the end. That's a lesson I thought you would have learned by now. The 17-year-old blonde sighed once more, nodded once more, and put his arms around his fiancée, holding her close as he began to fall asleep. I know, sweetheart, I love you. Riku put her head on her younger lover's chest and cuddled up to him, giggling. She uttered the words, I love you too, Naru. So much more than you could ever know, and fell asleep. The following day, the team's captain, Yamato, abruptly stopped close to a path sign and started to look around uneasily as the group traveled through the territory of Taiyo no Kuni, country of the sun, in the direction of Kusaka. Uncertain of his actions, Naruto took the initiative and chose to ask the question that was on everyone's mind. Yamato-sensei, why'd we stop? What's going on? Raising his hand, Yamato signaled his charge to be silent. After a moment, he turned off the path and entered the adjacent wooded area, gesturing for his group to follow him. This caused Naruto to frown in bewilderment, and he soon caught up to him and started asking him more questions. Okay, Yamato-sensei, what's going on? Did you sense some enemies ahead of us or something? After surveying his team, the wood release user fixed a stern look into Naruto's eyes. Yamato chose to give an explanation while shaking his head negatively. No, Naruto, there were no enemies ahead. I'm just trying to be cautious. Before leading the group through the forest, Yamato held up his hand to silence Naruto, who appeared about to interrupt him. While I don't believe Sasori was lying to us, there is always the possibility that this could be an Akatsuki ambush we're walking into. They could be lying in wait anywhere and I'd rather not risk the lives of my team. And before you say it, he continued, looking back at his teammates, I know how strong you all are. I've seen it for myself and I believe in all of you. But it's wisest to avoid confrontation with a powerful enemy when you can help it. Besides, our mission clearly states that we're to confront Sasori's spy on the Tenchi Bridge and capture him or her to bring back to Konoha for questioning so we can finally get some answers about Orochimaru and his whereabouts. Am I understood? They soon arrived at a clearing in the middle of the woods after everyone nodded in agreement. Yamato paused there, then turned back to the group and resumed his conversation. Now, we've got some distance to go yet, but I wanted to pause for a moment to go over our strategy here. He started by saying, as the leader of this team and as someone that is familiar with Sasori after our encounter with him, I'll be transforming into him and greeting our spy. With a frown on her face and her arms folded across her chest, Yang asked, isn't it dangerous to go alone though? Sounds pretty dangerous to me. Yamato gave a nod and went on. It is. That's why I propose we use a type of buddy system. He suggested. After she nodded, Yamato turned to face the other teams and started enumerating them. We should work in pairs and watch each other's backs. Sakura, you're with me. Naruto and Temari, you'll make up another team. Riku, you and Gage are together for another team. Tawa, you and Meru. Finally, Yang and Blake. With a sly smile, Temari swiftly attached herself to Naruto's arm. A giddy, woohoo, I get to be with my Naru-kun. She cried as she stood close to him. It was a little distracting for him to feel his arm between Temari's breasts, but Naruto was able to concentrate. Got it, Yamato-sensei. What will our roles be during the mission? He asked. Although Yamato sighed at Temari's actions, he chose to ignore them in order to continue the mission. You all will take up positions around the bridge and wait for my signal. Once it's given, you are to move in and restrain the spy. Our goal is to capture him alive, so lethal force is not permitted. I know that makes this mission much harder, so I'm sorry. This spy is likely to be incredibly skilled and will likely put up a fight if we give him the chance, so act quickly and take him down hard as fast as you can. A sneak attack is our best bet. Sakura considered their orders and scowled for a moment. After a while, she expressed her concerns. Yamato-sensei, what if the spy realizes it's an ambush and acts before you can give the signal? What if he realizes you're not Sasori? Or what if this is all a trap set up by Orochimaru? What then? Yamato scowled in response, shook his head, and glanced around at the worried expressions on everyone's faces. If that's the case, and it very well could be, then I will act to restrain our foe before they can escape. You are to use your best judgment and act when you feel it's best to do so. I trust in all of you to do what's right when the time comes. He said with sincerity. The group gave him a grateful smile and hurried back through the forest to the Tenchi Bridge. After all, they couldn't afford to be late because the spy was scheduled to arrive today. Tenchi Bridge later. By the time they arrived at the Tenchi Bridge, it was nearly noon, and they were aware that the spy would arrive at any moment. Without wasting any time, Yamato changed into Sasori using the wood release transformation technique and spent some time practicing his voice impersonation until he got it perfect. Then he told his group to take their positions. To avoid being heard or sniffed out by the spy, Naruto, Sakura, and Temari all walked together, being careful to stay downwind from the direction the spy was most likely coming from. They started talking quietly among themselves after locating a suitable location to lie in wait. Naruto said, "So Sakura-chan, any idea who the spy might be?" Sakura gave a negative shake of her head. "Not a clue, Naruto-kun. We don't know a whole lot of people from Oto, so it could be anyone. The only person I can think of would be Kabuto, but why would he be a spy for the Akatsuki? It just wouldn't make any sense to me." Temari shook her head and scowled. "No, actually, it would make perfect sense if you stopped to think about it. With Kabuto's skill set, it's obvious that Orochimaru would have made him a valuable member of his group, if not his right-hand man like he is now. What better place is there for a spy to be? You wouldn't suspect him, and with all Kabuto's done in Orochimaru's service, I certainly wouldn't suspect him of being a spy either. But, considering the fact that we never suspected Yura of being an Akatsuki spy either, it's entirely possible for Kabuto to be a spy as well," she clarified. The three of them nodded their heads in agreement with this theory, but they soon fell silent as they observed the spy enter the bridge and pause roughly midway to await Sasori's arrival. After a little while, Yamato appeared, posing as the deceased Akatsuki member. The group's ninjas were startled to discover that the spy was, in fact, Kabuto Yakushi, Orochimaru's right-hand man, when he turned to face the Konoha Jonin and slightly drew back his hood to reveal his face. Naruto remarked, "Well, it looks like you were right, Temari-chan. But, I don't like this one bit. Kabuto's just as sneaky as that snake he follows. Yamato-sensei's in trouble and he probably doesn't even realize it yet." Sakura shook her head and put a hand on Naruto's shoulder. "Yamato-sensei will be fine, Naruto-kun. He's been placed in charge of our team for a reason. Just trust in him to handle this appropriately, okay honey?" she reassured him. "If he needs us, Yamato-sensei will give us the signal, just like he showed us." With a scowl, Temari gave Sakura a shoulder pat. Guys," she said, pointing to the bridge now that she had their focus. They frowned at what they saw. After Orochimaru displayed his unsightly mug, Kabuto was now standing next to their sensei, ready to use his chakra scalpel technique. Naruto changed into the gunner dress sphere and carefully aimed at Kabuto's hand after realizing what was going to happen. Naruto fired just as he was about to use the chakra scalpel to attack Yamato. Kabuto's hand screamed in pain as the bullet passed through it, negating the technique. His hand struck the wood so forcefully that it cried out in more anguish and protest. Kabuto yelled at the phony Sasori, "Kami, damn it. What the hell did you just do, you rotten bastard?" Yamato started to shuffle backwards, realizing that his cover had been blown by now, and raised his hand to signal, but Orochimaru attacked him with the Kusanagi, forcing him to abandon the disguise if he wished to live. After removing the disguise, Yamato slapped his palms against the bridge and flipped through hand seals. He yelled, "Wood release, wood dragon technique," as a massive wooden dragon erupted from the bridge and charged in Orochimaru's direction. At best, that will divert his attention for a little while. He's too strong for me to defeat alone. It's time to invite the others. Yamato signaled his allies to come to his aid by raising his hand. Kabuto focused on the odd gadget in Naruto's hand as soon as the others reached the bridge and then glared into his eyes. "You, Naruto, are you the one that hit me with that strange technique?" The blonde gunner twirled the gun in his hand and grinned at the ninja in front of him who were wearing glasses. "Yep, and I'll do it again too if you don't surrender to us now. Come with us peacefully and you'll get to keep your limbs intact. Struggle, and well, you'll find out just how much pain my girls and I can inflict on a person without killing them. I can promise you this, it's a lot." The medic nin shook his head negatively and gave Naruto a ferocious glare while examining his hand, which had finally healed. "I'm not going anywhere with you, Naruto. But I see what you want. You want information on Sasuke-kun and Orochimaru, don't you? Hey, you won't be getting it out of me." Yang put on her Ember Celica gauntlets, grinned, and cracked her knuckles. Before she charged forward and punched Kabuto in the stomach, she yelled, "Oh, that is such a poor choice, pal. You see, I've just been dying to get my hands on a new punching bag, and from what I've heard, you sound like you'd make a great one." Seeing this coming, Kabuto ducked out of the way and tried to use his reactivated chakra scalpel technique to strike the blonde bombshell, but he was cut off by a shout of, double smack. He was then hit twice by a big hammer, which sent him flying over the bridge and into the canyon wall they were hovering over. Meru looked away, blushing slightly. Oops, maybe I hit him a little too hard, she asked in a somewhat contrite manner. Yamato sighed and was about to speak, but he started to perspire when he witnessed an enormous snake finally destroy his wooden dragon. As he watched Orochimaru start to approach them, he remarked, "Shit. I was hoping that would keep him occupied for a while longer." Orochimaru teased, "Tisk, tisk, tisk. You shouldn't try to use the gift I gave you on me, young one. I'll admit I was surprised to see you again, especially when you used my own gift against me like that. I had thought that all my precious test subjects had died. And yet, here you are. But, it would seem you're still a failure after all. Your technique was nowhere close to the level that Hashirama's was at. Whatever am I supposed to do with you now?" he asked as though he were discussing a failed laboratory project. With perplexed looks on their faces, Yamato's team glanced between Orochimaru and their sensei, but they dismissed it right away, opting to ask Yamato about it at a later time. For the time being, they had Orochimaru to either kill or chase away, if they could, and Kabuto to capture. When Yang noticed Kabuto approaching from behind, Blake yelled for her to be on guard. Before she pulled the trigger on her pistol to alter the trajectory of her blade and send it behind Kabuto, she threw her gamble shroud and watched as Yang rolled forward away from their opponent. She pulled the trigger again, sending it crashing through Kabuto's left shoulder, then yanked him forward by pulling hard on the ribbon. Unwilling to be taken so easily, Kabuto yanked the blade from his shoulder and jumped away from Blake. He gave her a fierce look for a moment before grinning and turning to face Naruto. "I don't think this is going well at all. But perhaps, just possibly," he asked, his smirk widening as Naruto's face twisted in rage, or at least that's how it seemed to him. "Naruto, tell me something. Do you still believe that Sasuke-kun can be saved from the likes of us? That we manipulated him into coming to us? Sasuke-kun never saw you as the brother that you view him as, Naruto. There was never a special bond there between the two of you. It was all in your head. Then again, you have always lived in your own special fantasy world, haven't you, Naruto? A world where everything is all sunshine and rainbows and nobody ever has to die. I bet you still try to spare all of your enemies, don't you? Believing that if you show them mercy, they'll pay it forward. Tell me, are you going to show me mercy?" he asked before bursting into laughter. "Just thinking about it. Of course, you'd have to beat me first before you could even think of." 6 loud gunshots and a sensation that was very strange to Kabuto, scalding hot pain, interrupted him. As he looked down at his body, he noticed that he had 6 new gunshot wounds in different places. Each wound affected an organ that is typically thought to be essential to life, but Kabuto believed that each wound would heal with time. The medic nin fell to his hands and knees, hacking up mouthfuls of blood, and started to tend to his internal wounds in order to save his life. He could just make out the faint sound of a conversation going on in the background. He heard, "Old have killed him." With his gun aimed down at Kabuto, who looked up at Naruto pleadingly, as if pleading with him not to shoot again, Naruto said, "Relax, Yamato-sensei, look. He heals fast from all kinds of wounds, even those." With a sigh, Yamato shook his head. As he focused on their more serious threat, Orochimaru, he emphasized, "Regardless, try to be more careful next time. We do need to take him alive after all." Yamato wasn't even the Snake Sage's main concern. No, Naruto was the sole object of his attention. The slippery snake licked his lips as he looked him over, anticipating what he was certain would be a delightful battle, a fun conversation, or maybe even a tantalizing taste of both. Naruto-kun, you've grown since I last saw you," he replied. Curious, he asked, "Do tell me, how have you been?" Before turning to Orochimaru, Naruto glanced at his girls and gave them a nod to watch Kabuto. He moved to stand next to Yamato, scowled at the Snake Sage, and met his eyes. He angrily remarked, "As if you haven't been keeping tabs on me, Orochimaru." Orochimaru asked, genuinely interested in his young friend. "Oh ho, so I've been caught, have I? Tell me, how did you know I'd been keeping an eye on you? The Kyuubi and I may not always get along, but one thing we do agree on is that we hate the smell of snakes. Your snakes were good at keeping themselves hidden, but they couldn't hide from the Kyuubi's senses. I was always careful when they were around not to reveal anything I wanted to keep hidden from the world so you wouldn't find a way to counter my abilities. Naruto clarified. The teenager across from him received a round of applause, and Orochimaru couldn't contain his laughter. He had a positively giddy look on his face when he finally calmed down and turned to face Naruto. The snake sage began to gleefully rub his hands together and said, "Wonderful Naruto-kun. Simply wonderful. You turned out to be everything I had hoped you would be growing up. But I wonder, which of you is stronger? Sasuke-kun, or you, Naruto-kun? Perhaps a little test to find out." Naruto looked over his shoulder and was happy to see that his girls had captured Kabuto. They even put a gag in his mouth to prevent him from biting his tongue to end his life. The blonde turned back to Orochimaru and waved the captured spy away, grinning. "Nah, I think I'll have to pass. We've already got what we came for, so there's really no reason for me to stick around and play with you today. Maybe next time." The snake sage sighed and shook his head when he looked over Naruto's shoulder and saw the condition of his right-hand man. "I see, so you were after Kabuto all along then. Or perhaps," Orochimaru smirked and gazed intently into Naruto's eyes after giving it some thought. With a twisted smile, he said, "You were hoping to get information on Sasuke-kun and me." He shot forward like a snake ready to bite its victim, saying, "I'm right, aren't I? Well, then, I'm afraid I'm going to have to insist you show me what you've got after all, Naruto-kun. Fight me." Orochimaru was forced to flee from Naruto or risk being turned into Swiss cheese when Gage swiftly pulled out her Jacob's assault rifle and started shooting at him. "If you want to get to him, you gotta get through all of us first, ya creep. Now go, death trap," she yelled, glaring at him as she aimed her gun at him once more. Then, she unleashed her friend, Death Trap, who launched a powerful laser beam from its eye directly at Orochimaru, forcing him to either jump quickly out of the way or be split in two by the intense heat the beam was emitting. "I didn't plan this way at all. I wanted to test Naruto-kun out and get him some alone time, but this. All of this, what?" The slow, mechanical beast had a single arm with razor-sharp claws, which Orochimaru avoided. Orochimaru saw an opening and pulled out the Kusanagi blade again, stabbing it through Death Trap's armored torso and deep inside. Unfazed, Death Trap threw its claw out in a whirlwind maneuver, the Kusanagi still buried deep in its chest. Orochimaru was a mangled mess after the attack and was currently lying on the ground, twitching occasionally as he struggled to move. He had not anticipated that the mechanical beast would still be able to move. To Orochimaru's ire, Death Trap eventually disappeared, taking the Kusanagi blade with it. He then regurgitated a brand new body for himself that looked brand new. But he was angry and wanted to vent his frustration on the girl who had stolen his favorite weapon. But before he could, he had to avoid a barrage of wooden spears that were hurled from underground at him. As he completed dodging the final spears of his wood release, River of Spears technique, Yamato couldn't help but sneer at Orochimaru. "One thing you fail to understand, Orochimaru, is that we work as a team. We trust in one another and work together to overcome any foe, even you. You may want to test Naruto, but we're not about to let you have your way." Orochimaru growled in response, gazing into Naruto's eyes as though he were looking for a response. "Is this your answer, Naruto-kun? You refuse to face me yourself. You let others do the fighting for you, whereas Sasuke-kun would never have backed away from such a challenge." With a sigh, the blonde used his free hand to rub the back of his head while keeping his gun in the other. "Yeah, you see, here's the thing, Orochimaru. I'm not Sasuke. I never have been. I believe in something called teamwork. I don't believe that I have to do everything by myself. I have friends by my side that I can count on to be there for me when I need them to be. We fight together and we win together. They give me strength just as I give them strength. Sasuke, he doesn't have any of that. Sasuke doesn't even know what true strength is. Sasuke will always be weak, which is why he's the perfect host for you, Orochimaru. You and Sasuke were practically made for each other. You're both weak-spirited, weak-willed, and weak in body as well. Losers in practically every way. How much more do you need to see that you're a match made in hell?" Naruto laughed. By now, Orochimaru was feeling irritated. No one talked to him like this. No one. Summoning. 10,000 venomous snakes technique. The snake sage yelled as he suddenly went through hand seals for one of his strongest jutsu, then slammed his hands to the ground. In a matter of seconds, thousands of snakes, each larger than a mature man and all highly venomous, started to emerge from the grounds, ready to attack the group of good guys. Enjoy playing with my pets. I've got somewhere else to be. Farewell Naruto-kun. May we meet again, Orochimaru said as he left the area after completing his summoning. Yamato took a moment to consider his options while glancing at his team. He knew that Naruto and his girls must have some tricks up their sleeves because they were soon encircled by snakes and things appeared rather bleak. After giving it some thought, Yamato turned to face Meru and asked, Meru, can you do anything about this with your magic? With hope. Meru nodded slowly after surveying all the snakes. I can try, but I think our best bet would be Naru's time magic. Think you can do it, Naru? Naruto scowled as he observed all of the snakes. What about Tawa-chan? She's far better at utilizing her time magic than I am with mine. And, now kinda warrants Tawa's accuracy with her spells rather than me blundering with my magic. Before starting to defend Naruto from any snakes that approached too closely, Tawa scowled at him and gave him a blow to the back of the head. You just need to believe in yourself, Naruto. And you'd better do it soon, because we're going to be overwhelmed if you don't do it. Naruto nodded in comprehension and changed back into his ninja attire before concentrating on his magic. When he had a firm grasp on it, he yelled, Time Surge. As he glanced ahead at all the snakes, Naruto started moving around with a kunai as time rushed past him, cutting the heads off of as many snakes as he could for however long his spell lasted. He almost fell to his knees, panting, when it was finally over, but Meru was able to catch him by the shoulders and keep him upright. At least 3/4 of the snakes fell to the ground dead, and the group watched. The other 2,500 persisted in their attack, but before they could advance, Tawa used her own time spell to eliminate the remaining 2,500 and then reappeared, panting just as Naruto did. She straightened up and smoothed out her hair after saying, that really puts a strain on the body. She complained angrily, I'll be happy if I never have to see another snake for as long as I live. Yamato glanced around the group and saw that everyone was fine despite being frazzled by their near-death experience. He turned to Naruto and Tawa, grinning, and chose to express his gratitude. He caught everyone's attention by saying, Naruto, Tawa, thank you for saving our lives. However, we now have a choice to make. Yamato turned to Kabuto, squinted at him, and shook his head before turning back to his group. We've captured our target. Our mission is technically complete. We can return to Konoha now and turn him over to Hokage-sama and Ibiki for interrogation, or... At this, Naruto scowled and met his team captain's gaze. Kabuto told you where their base is before he attacked you, didn't he? Yamato gave a head nod. Bingo. But more than that, I managed to plant a seed on Orochimaru that will allow me to track him back to his hideout, just in case Kabuto was lying about the whereabouts of their base. Sakura shook her head and scowled at this. What if the seed falls off sensei? We'd be searching for the base blindly then. At that, Riku shook her head and gestured to Naruto. That's not true. Naru and I can use our psychic dress spheres to dive into Kabuto's mind if we need to find out exactly where the base is. So if Captain Yamato's method doesn't work, then just leave it up to Naru and me. We can do it, can't we, Naru? Naruto nodded to his beloved Riku-chan and laughed. He asked, shivering a little at the thought of it. Of course, Riku-chan. Though I'd be careful when entering this snake's mind. Who knows how fucked up it is in there? To regain their attention, Yamato clapped his hands. When everyone, including Yamato, raised their hands, he grinned and nodded at his team. Enough. Let's put it to a vote. All those in favor of following Orochimaru back to his base in an effort to capture the traitor Sasuke Uchiha and perhaps, if we're lucky, killing Orochimaru, raise your hands. As he lifted the bound medic nin over his shoulder and started to lead his team in the direction Orochimaru had fled, he grinned and said, then it's settled. We're going to end this once and for all. Come on, Kabuto, let's go for a ride. The hideout of Orochimaru. The team was initially perplexed as to what was happening when they reached a rather large rock formation. Sakura asked, we are in the right place, right, Yamato-sensei? Yamato pointed to the ground while nodding his head. He's underground, and I'm positive this is the entrance right here. Rather than try and force our way in and alert Orochimaru and Sasuke that we're here, I'll use some of my techniques to sneak us in. He clarified. With Kabuto still slung over his shoulder, he gestured to him and said, first though, I'll be creating a wood clone to look after our friend here. Yamato looked around, located a suitable location for their underground dig, and proceeded to it. He set Kabuto down close by, made a wood clone to follow him, then walked back to the location he had chosen and yelled the name of his earth release technique, making a big hole. The group whistled as they peered down the hole, which seemed to go quite far underground. He started giving orders while glancing around at his team. "All right team, here's the plan. I'll go in first. Temari, when I give the signal, I want you to come in next. Then we'll go in this order: Riku, Tawa, Young, Gage, Blake, Sakura, Naruto, Meru." "Understood." Yamato turned and leapt into the hole, vanishing beneath the surface when everyone nodded in agreement. Temari turned and kissed her boyfriend on the lips and winked at him when they heard a whistle. She laughed and jumped into the hole after Yamato, saying, "Couldn't resist sweetie." As they all started to jump down into the hole one by one in the order Yamato had prescribed, Naruto laughed and shook his head in amusement. Naturally, Yang decided she simply had to outdo Temari before jumping down. In order to tease him, she grabbed Naruto by the rumple of his shirt, pulled him into a fiery kiss, and then used her free hand to rub his crotch over his pants, of course while penetrating his mouth with her tongue. She looked down as she retreated and saw that he was semi-hard. She grinned and nodded her head. Before she jumped down the hole, she said, "Good. My job is done." The blonde prankster moaned in pain as he attempted to control his erection. "Did you really have to go and do that, Yang? Damn it, are you on a mission?" When it was his turn, he asked in silence and then leapt down the hole. They passed a solid stone wall after a brief journey through the underground tunnel that Yamato had dug. Meru pouted and said, "Well, isn't that just peachy? How are we going to get through that?" Yamato approached the wall and eyed a rather noticeable crack without uttering a word. Grinning, he placed his finger a few inches away from the fissure and, using his skill with his Kekkei Genkai, effectively drilled a hole in the wall. Before he leapt through the hole and into the hideout on the other side, he turned back to his team and smiled at them, saying, "That's how. Now let's go." The black-eyed man glanced at his team after everyone had finished before he started outlining his new directives. "All right everyone, I want you to follow me in the same pattern mentioned before. Chances are that wherever Orochimaru is, Sasuke is probably close by. Follow me." The group felt uneasy as Yamato guided them farther into Orochimaru's base. Indeed, they had previously succeeded in driving Orochimaru away at the Tenchi Bridge, but now they were in his territory. Furthermore, they would now also have to contend with Sasuke. Their new objective was to apprehend Sasuke and bring him back to Konoha. They knew Sasuke would be trying his hardest to kill them, but they would have to use non-lethal attacks in order to keep him alive. Furthermore, they were unaware of the Uchiha's strength now that he had undergone specialized training from the Snake Sage. They eventually reached a crossroads where they could go in 3 different directions, 4 if you include the path they had just taken. Yamato shook his head and scowled as he looked around. "I hate to say it, but we're going to have to split up here. Our primary goal is to search out and capture Sasuke Uchiha. If you encounter Orochimaru, either stall him and radio for backup or flee, do not attempt to fight him by yourselves," he instructed. After everyone nodded, he said, "Then move out," before turning and racing down the hallway with his team, while the other 2 teams followed suit. "Now, Meru, Riku, Yang, you 3 go down the center path. Naruto, Tawa, Blake, you go down the left. Sakura, Temari, Gage, and myself will go down the right." "Understood." Naruto's group continued deeper into the base after opening every door they encountered and discovering nothing on the level they were on. They heard footsteps approaching their location as they kept moving forward. Naruto, Tawa, and Blake all froze in place as they saw Orochimaru smile as he stepped out of the darkness in front of them. "Ah, Naruto-kun, I see you've come to play with me after all. I didn't get to play with you earlier due to the interference of your friends, but perhaps you'd like to change that now. Or, perhaps you're here for Sasuke-kun. If so, I'm afraid you're searching in the wrong place. Too bad Naruto-kun, you'll have to play with me instead." The snake Sanin took a bite out of his hand and yelling, "Hidden Shadow Snake Hands." Before sphere changing into the black mage dress sphere, Naruto went, "TCH." He raised his rod above his head, concentrated his magical energy, and yelled, "Fire." Suddenly, the snakes that had been charging at them were on fire, and the flames swiftly spread down the snakes to Orochimaru, who had to throw them away to avoid getting burned. Naruto grinned and nodded his head while glancing at his girlfriends. Then he reached up and pressed a button on the provided headset. Before he flared his chakra for the first time as a signal to Yamato, he said into the headset, Yamato-sensei, we've encountered Orochimaru. Requesting backup if you can provide it. I'll flare my chakra periodically to signal my position to you, so hurry. She gazed at the slippery snake in front of her, and Blake scowled deeply. She was aware that she was strong and capable of putting up a fierce fight, but this opponent was unlike any other she had ever encountered in either world. She could die with a single misstep or small mistake. She inhaled deeply, pulled Gamble's shroud out of its sheath, and readied herself for battle. However, as Tawa gazed at the snake Sanin, she couldn't help but grin. She was aware that she had the element of surprise on her side because he had never seen anything like magic before. More than that, though, she always enjoyed a good fight, and this guy just made her feel uncomfortable. She grabbed her dagger of eternity, took a deep breath to calm herself, and kept an eye on the snake to see what he might try next. Any move he made would be met with a counterattack from her. However, Naruto made the decision to start things his own way. He smirked as he waved his rod and pointed it in the direction of the snake rather than waiting for Orochimaru to make a move, which could be suicidal in and of itself. Blizzara. The slippery snake screamed in pain as a big spear of ice erupted where Orochimaru stood and a chilling mist enveloped him. He shivered from the cold he still felt and looked Naruto in the eyes while rapidly regurgitating a new body. What was that? I didn't even anticipate it. No, that wasn't chakra. Astonished, he thought to himself. The snake Sanin caught a glimpse of the black-haired girl flying through the air toward him and swinging her weapon at his face. With a laugh, he yelled, "Hidden Shadow Snake Hands," and pointed both hands at her before launching several snakes from his sleeves in her direction. Having foreseen this attack, Blake swiftly used her resemblance to create a shadow clone and leapt off of it, jumping behind Orochimaru and slashing his back a few times. But before she could do more, the snake's neck stretched out, his head whirled, and he tried to bite her neck, forcing her to jump back and away. She obviously did not want to go through such a thing. Naruto and Tawa nodded and swiftly met each other's eyes while Orochimaru was preoccupied with Blake. The black mage grinned and said, "How about a little jolt to brighten your day?" Thundera. Before returning his attention to his magic, a powerful bolt of lightning struck the snake, and Tawa instantly used one of her ice magic spells to send it flying at the snake Sanin, who was unable to quickly dodge out of the way because of the lightning. Two strong spells were cast upon Orochimaru, and he screamed out in agony and anger. He turned to Naruto and Tawa and tried a technique but was unable to use it. He tried again, but the issue persisted. He could not use any of his techniques, no matter how hard he tried. His eyes widened in horror as he looked at the two blondes. "What have you two done to me?" The former princess crossed her arms over her chest and grinned. "It's called chemistry, Orochimaru. Combine two spells in a certain order and they tend to have a special effect. In this case, the effect our spells had is called silence. Against other magic users, it would prevent them from casting spells. But against shinobi such as yourself, it prevents them from using their techniques. It's rather brilliant, wouldn't you agree?" When Yamato's group emerged and the wall behind him collapsed, trapping the snake Sanin between the two groups, Orochimaru started to panic and try to think of a way out of the mess he had gotten himself into. Seeing no other option, he made the decision to try to escape this situation by using taijutsu. His intended victim, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto swiftly retreated and executed another sphere change as soon as he had the chance, given that he had been the victim of a vicious attack and was trapped in the black mage dress sphere of all things. When his transformation was complete, he found himself in the berserker dress sphere. When Naruto first activated this dress sphere, he used his intimidate ability to harm Orochimaru and grant him the slow status, which slowed down both his movement and his attacks and made him easier to defeat. The blonde ninja immediately smirked as he unleashed Berserk and went on a rampage, delivering a barrage of strong blows to the slowed snake Sanin. The snake sage lay on the floor, bruised, broken, and covered in blood, when time finally returned to normal. He struggled to stand, still unable to use any of his techniques, but ultimately coughed up blood and fell again under his own weight. Damn it, damn you all. Yamato swiftly crushed Orochimaru's body into paste using a wood release technique since he was no longer a threat, leaving only a shattered corpse. They all gazed at the now deceased villain as he eventually cancelled the technique. Sakura asked warily, Is he really, finally dead now?" Observing the snake Sanin closely, Tawa tried to feel for any remaining life force inside of him. She smiled at the group and shook her head in the negative, then gestured for Yamato to take his head. "He's dead. Might want to collect his head so we can collect the bounty on him later. Yamato gave her a nod of agreement and proceeded swiftly to cut off Orochimaru's head before enclosing it in a storage scroll. His team heard and felt an explosion rock the base just as he was about to speak, and they quickly realized what was happening. The team leader yelled, "Sasuke! Crap, I almost forgot about him," before getting up and beckoning his group to follow him as he started to run down the corridors in the direction he thought Sasuke was going. Angrily, Naruto shook his head and gritted his teeth. "I swear to Kami that if those three are hurt because of him, that son of a bitch is dead meat, damn it. Please girls, be alright." When they eventually came out into a section of the crater where the sun was shining on them, they saw Meru, Riku, and Yang standing in the middle of it, with Sasuke smirking over them. Fortunately, the three girls appeared to be unharmed, but Riku's right arm was drooping limp at her side, as if she had been stabbed or something. Naruto hurried over to them and checked on them, making sure they were okay, before turning back to Sakura. "Sakura-chan, please tend to Riku. We'll deal with Sasuke," he yelled. With a nod, Sakura rushed to Riku's side and started caring for the vivacious thief's wound right away. In the meantime, Sasuke grinned viciously as he gazed down at Naruto. "So, you've come, Naruto. I had a feeling you would. Still planning to rescue me? Still think of me as your precious friend?" Gazing up at Sasuke, Naruto shook his head and scoffed. "Nope and nope, you're a traitor, Sasuke, and I'm here to kick your ass and drag your sorry butt back to Konoha to stand trial for your crimes. That's all there is to this. So I'll give you two choices. Either surrender yourself to us now and come back willingly, or resist and get your ass handed to you. Which is it going to be? Please choose the second option, because I would so love to pay you back for nearly killing me 3 years ago." Sasuke was powerless to stop himself. The thought of losing to Naruto, of all people, made him start to laugh. Gazing intently into Naruto's eyes, he used the strongest genjutsu he was capable of using on the blonde teenager. But a few moments later, Sasuke found himself scoffing when he emerged from it. The onyx-eyed Uchiha remarked, "So, you've learned some new tricks." "Well, so have I." Naruto sighed as he saw his former adversary vanish in a sudden rush of speed. He muttered, "So slow." Then, as Sasuke attempted to slip behind him, he slammed his fist into his stomach. He lifted his leg and slammed it down on Sasuke's back, sending him hard to the ground as he looked at the Uchiha, who was spewing a glob of saliva onto the ground. "I'm not here to kill you, Sasuke. But if you push me too far, I'll break every bone in your body and drag you back by your damn hair. Do you understand me?" Sasuke pushed himself to his feet, gave Naruto a fierce glare, and swiftly pulled out his katana, swinging it in Naruto's neck. Naruto sighed as he slipped beneath the blade and quickly changed into the thief Dressphere. He started a vicious duel with the Uchiha, blocking all of Sasuke's attacks with one blade while launching his own attacks with the other, which the Uchiha was finding difficult to avoid. He only said, "I warned you, Sasuke." This continued for a few moments before Naruto started to turn around, dodging his opponent's blows and slashing Sasuke's face, the back of his neck, the back of his knees, his forearms, and even cutting his left ear with kicks. He swerved, slipped in front of Sasuke, and delivered a couple of short punches to his opponent's solar plexus, causing him to skid backwards for roughly a dozen feet before he stopped. With his katana clattering to the ground in front of him, Sasuke snarled and dropped to his hands and knees. "How the hell did you get so strong? What the hell is going on here? You've always been a damned weakling. This is wrong. This is all wrong," he said, looking up into Naruto's eyes and punching the ground in frustration. Naruto straightened up, shook his head in dismay, and glanced down at Sasuke. He enraged his opponent even more by saying, "You're pathetic, Sasuke. Just look at you, throwing a temper tantrum because you're losing a fight. Boo-hoo, you're like a big baby without your bottle," he mocked cruelly. With a shaky stand, Sasuke activated his Chidori and charged as quickly as he could in the direction of his blonde foe. He growled angrily. He yelled, "Die, you rotten bastard. Chidori," before launching his assault, which was directly aimed at Naruto's heart. Naruto let out a sigh before jumping over Sasuke and stabbing him in the back with both of his daggers. Grasping his daggers tightly, he landed behind Sasuke and raised the Uchiha above his head before slamming him head first into the ground in front of him, knocking the bastard unconscious and making a loud crack sound. The blonde ninja sighed and glanced down at Sasuke before turning to face Meru, sphere changing back into his ninja attire. "Meru, Think you could heal him? It's best not to leave him a crippled mess. With a nod of approval, Meru approached and healed the unconscious Uchiha with one of her wingly spells. After that, Naruto placed a seal tag on Sasuke's forehead to stop him from using his chakra and Sharingan, and Yamato used one of his wood release techniques to bind him. When they were ready, the group departed from Orochimaru's base and went back to where they had left Kabuto and the wood clone. They were just as they had left them, and they sighed with relief. According to Yamato, "Well Naruto, it would seem your seal works wonderfully." Naruto looked at Yamato and pouted at this. "Hey, I told you that my seals would do the trick, didn't I? I studied under Jiraiya-sensei for years and they came easy to me. I know what I'm doing, Yamato-sensei." At this, Yamato laughed and gave a single nod. "Relax Naruto, I was only teasing. Now, let's take these two and head for home. I'm looking forward to finishing this mission and getting some R&R, he acknowledged. Yang cheered and raised her fist. She smiled broadly and said, Here, I can get on board with that. I want a date with Naruto when we get back. You'd better take me somewhere nice, Buster. You got that?" Naruto nodded his head and laughed. Then they all started the long journey home, and he said, "Of course, sweetheart. Now, let's get going. I'd rather not stay here any longer than we have to." As Tsunade watched Team Yamato drag Kabuto and Sasuke into her office, she couldn't help but smile proudly. She looked directly into the team leader's eyes and said, "Report." After giving a nod, Yamato started his report. "The mission went well, Hokage-sama. Extraordinarily so. Upon arriving at the Tenchi Bridge, the identity of Sasori's spy turned out to be that of one Kabuto Yakushi. I managed to glean information from him regarding the whereabouts of Orochimaru's current hideout, but it turned out that Orochimaru had freed Kabuto from Sasori's control a long time ago and I was attacked by Kabuto. At the same time, Orochimaru appeared on the bridge. The Godime Hokage sighed and replied, based on the fact that you're all standing here before me, with two of Konoha's most wanted at your feet, can I assume that either Orochimaru got away or you somehow managed to finish him off?" Yamato gave one nod, then went on. "Kabuto was defeated quite handily and captured by the team. He attempted to goad Naruto into flying into a berserk rage, but, let's just say that didn't go according to plan," he said as he rubbed his head. As for Orochimaru, he seemed to have taken an unnatural interest in Naruto and tried to coerce him into a one-on-one fight against him. Instead of allowing himself to be baited, Naruto remained perfectly calm, and for that I commend him," he said with pride. Looking to see if he was correct, he saw Gage nod at him with a smile on her face. When Orochimaru tried to attack Naruto, Gage fought him off and revealed her mechanical friend, Deathtrap, to us all. I'm not quite sure how to describe what I saw that thing do. Deathtrap's destructive power is insane, and Orochimaru was wounded as a result of his fight with Gage's robot, I think she calls it. Well, Orochimaru attempted to slay Deathtrap with his Kusanagi blade, but Gage and Deathtrap ended up stealing the sword away from him. "Gage, if you'd please show Hokage-sama," he asked. Tsunade turned to face Gage and noticed a sheath and sword handle that had previously not been visible protruding from behind her back. Oh, on the way back to the village, they must have bought the sheath. Wondering, she thought to herself. After giving an enthusiastic nod, Gage pulled the Kusanagi out of its sheath on her back and held it out for Tsunade to see. "See, this thing is awesome, Hokage. It's so sharp and it was able to pierce Deathtrap somehow. Can I keep it? I'd love to have something else I can use so I don't end up spending all my ammo too quickly." After carefully inspecting the blade with her hands, the voluptuous Godime Hokage nodded to herself. "This is, indeed, the Kusanagi. I'm surprised you were able to retrieve it. If you want it, the blade is yours, Gage. You'll need to undergo training in order to wield it properly though. Can you handle that?" Gage nodded once and then pumped her fist into the air, beaming broadly. "Woohoo, I get to keep it. And no problems, Hokage. I'll train hard as hell to learn how to wield this baby. I'm looking forward to it." Tsunade gave the sword back to Gage while chuckling to herself, then grinned at Yamato. "Continue, please. I want to hear the rest of your report." According to Yamato, "Yes ma'am. After losing his blade, Orochimaru unleashed a rather sizable army of snakes upon us before fleeing in the direction of his hideout. I am proud to say that Naruto was able to use his time magic without any repercussions this time, Hokage-sama. Together, he and Tawa saved us. Afterwards, we proceeded to follow after Orochimaru, tracking him with a seed I had planted on his clothing during combat with him. he explained. Upon arriving at his base, I created a wood clone to watch Kabuto while the rest of us burrowed our way inside. Our primary goal at this point was to find and capture Sasuke Uchiha so we could bring him back to Konoha to stand trial for his crimes. Yamato went on. Upon reaching a split in our path, we split up into 3 separate groups. The groups were as follows. Meru, Riku, and Yang made up the first team. Naruto, Tawa, and Blake made up team number 2. Finally, the last team consisted of Gage, Sakura, Temari, and myself. We had hoped that we would be able to find and retrieve Sasuke without alerting Orochimaru to our presence, but Yamato sighed, rubbed the back of his head, and then gave Tsunade an uneasy smile. Naruto's team encountered Orochimaru and fought him. I don't know the exact details of the fight from that point, however. Naruto, if you would. After giving a single nod, Naruto carried on where his team leader had left off. As Yamato-sensei said, my team encountered Orochimaru in our search for Sasuke. The 3 of us fought him, but as a superior foe with a wide arsenal of ninjutsu at his disposal, we had to be careful. I decided to employ the use of magic against him via use of my black mage dress sphere. He clarified. Once we saw a proper opening, Tawa and I combined our magic and unleashed one of Tawa's chemistry effects on him. At this point, Tawa took over to give an explanation. Chemistry involves casting 2 elemental spells back-to-back on a foe that will result in certain conditions. For instance, I can create lava that burns away at one's health or, in Orochimaru's case, I can cast a type of silencing effect on him that negates use of magic, or, in his case, all of his ninjutsu and whatever genjutsu he might have known. Needless to say, this made it impossible for Orochimaru to regurgitate a new body for himself whenever he took too much damage. At this, Naruto grinned and gave a nod of approval. It was at this point, when we thought he might attempt to flee from us, that Yamato-sensei's team arrived on the scene and helped us box Orochimaru and so he couldn't flee. He elaborated. He turned to face Yamato and asked, without the ability to heal himself, we were able to end Orochimaru's life. Yamato-sensei. With a nod, Yamato opened a small storage scroll and began to open its contents, exposing Tsunade Orochimaru's head. As you can see, we took his head as proof of the deed. Tsunade gazed at the severed head of her former teammate and nodded. I see. Great work, all of you. You'll all be paid an equal sum of the bounty that was placed on his head. Now, since I assume there's more, I ask that you continue. With a sigh, Yamato turned to face the trio that had come into contact with Sasuke. He turned back toward Tsunade and went on with his report. The remaining team of 3, Meru, Riku, and Yang, encountered Sasuke while we were busy with Orochimaru. When the rest of us heard an explosion, we hurried to reach the 3 of them to ensure that not only were they all right, but to make sure that Sasuke didn't escape us either. Remembering what had happened when they had met Sasuke, Riku rubbed her arm. Rewind. The 3 of them had been looking for this Sasuke Uchiha they had heard so much about for a while now. They were all excited to drag him in front of their beloved Naruto and kick his ass. Unfortunately, there was no life at all in any of the rooms they searched. They finally came to a door and pushed it open, but they froze when they noticed Sasuke Uchiha standing there, his Sharingan activated, closely examining each of them. And who might you 3 be? You're certainly not guests of Orochimaru's, or else you'd know better than to disturb me when I'm trying to rest, he grumbled. Yang then gave Sasuke a dramatic point after pumping her fist. We're here to drag your sorry butt back to Konoha. Try to resist and we'll kick your ass, pretty boy, she exclaimed. He took a closer look at them and saw the Konoha headbands they all wore on various body parts. Meru's was hanging loosely around her neck, Riku's was wrapped around her left forearm close to her shoulder, and Yang's was worn as a belt. Naturally, he had no idea who these 3 were. All he knew was that they were here to take him back to the abandoned Kami village from which he had fought so hard to flee years before. I see. So you 3 are kunoichi from Konoha then. I won't ask how you found this place, as I'm sure Orochimaru must have screwed up somehow. Instead, let me say this, I'm not going back with you to that rotten place. They were holding me back from obtaining true power. I would never have been allowed to hunt down Itachi had I stayed. So if you're going to try and drag me back to that accursed place, then I'll just have to kill you all, he said as he raised his blade and charged toward them. Seeing how fast he was approaching, Meru swiftly used her hammer to block his blade. She raised one of her hands to his face and started to cast one of her wingly spells, but Sasuke anticipated this and yelled, "Chidori current." Meru screamed loudly in agony before separating from him and starting to pant as electricity arced along her weapon and into her body. The electricity she had consumed was causing her to have occasional muscle spasms, but she would be okay with rest and maybe some healing. Seeing one of her friends hurt in this way infuriated Yang, who slammed her fists together and used her Ember Celica weapons. She charged forward and started kicking and punching Sasuke, who was avoiding them by the thinnest of margins. When she finally had enough, she punched him in the stomach and fired a shot from her gauntlet, only to discover that Sasuke had slipped around behind her. Her eyes widened as she realized she was definitely a goner. He had to jump away from Yang as Riku, seeing what Sasuke was going to do, rushed forward and slashed her dual daggers at him. Sasuke calmly gazed into Riku's eyes before starting a vicious duel with her. When he eventually noticed a gap in her form, he stabbed her arm with his sword. He wasn't done there, though. He started streaming the Chidori's power again, but this time he directed it into Riku's body through his sword, causing her to shriek. With enough of this, Meru gathered a lot of her own magical power and hurled a huge fireball at Sasuke to drive him away from her best friend. Sasuke immediately threw up his arms and braced himself as the room exploded, sending the ceiling collapsing around them and the entire base rumbling as he realized the power behind this odd technique. Meru, Riku, and Yang emerged from the debris they had been buried beneath to find Sasuke standing over them once everything had cleared and the sun had started to shine. They braced themselves for more battle with the bastard, but they were relieved to hear Naruto's voice. "I'm grateful." They shared a common thought. Final flashback. Someone shouted her name, Iku. Riku, to her. Riku looked around and saw that, for some reason, everyone was now staring at her. She rubbed the area where she had been stabbed and smiled at them, blushing in shame. She said, "Sorry guys. What's going on now?" Tsunade shook her head in frustration and let out a sigh. "I was asking if you're okay now. They told me you were stabbed. I assume you're feeling better." Riku nodded a few times in agreement, grinning at the worry Tsunade was displaying. Yep, I'm feeling great, though." The Godime understood and nodded her head. Thanks to the Hokage, Riku grinned and resumed listening as Yamato went on with his report. "Phantom pains, right, I know how those can be. It'll pass with time, I assure you. Anyway, as I was saying, the rest of us got ready to deal with Sasuke while Sakura attended to Riku's obvious wound. However, Yamato grinned at Naruto. Naruto was able to defeat him soundly on his own. Sasuke didn't take losing to him very well and tried to kill him, but in the end, Naruto was victorious over Sasuke and we succeeded in capturing him. And now, that brings us here, back to you." He concluded his account. The beautiful Godime Hokage nodded her head in comprehension, then glanced at the two captured subjects before nodding once more as she made up her mind. "Very well. Kabuto will be taken to Teni for questioning. He likely knows the locations of all of Orochimaru's hideouts as well as information on the people located at each. If we can get such information from him, we can systematically wipe out what remains of Orochimaru's forces. We may even retrieve valuable information from his hideouts. Then again, I'm not sure exactly what we may find, so I'd recommend being prepared for anything if I happen to send you out in search of them." She continued. Tsunade snapped her fingers and saw two of her Anbu materialize. As the aforementioned Anbu vanished with Orochimaru's right-hand man, she ordered, "Boar, take Kabuto to Ibiki. Tell him that I want he and his men to extract every last bit of information from this wretch that they can get. As for Sasuke, I'll be gathering the council together so we can discuss a suitable punishment for him. Personally, I would prefer to just execute him, but I'm curious to see how many of those on the council are willing to stick their necks out for this piece of scum. It will help me determine who needs to be replaced and who can stay," she said, staring at the Uchiha. "Hawk, take the Uchiha to the council chambers. I'll be there shortly." Tsunade turned to Team Yamato and grinned proudly at each member after Hawk and Sasuke vanished. She stood up from her chair and started to lead them out of her office and to the council chambers after saying, "You have all done exceptionally well. I'd love to give you all time off right away, but for now I must insist that you follow me to the council chambers. As those directly involved in the capture of Sasuke Uchiha, as well as you being the Uzumaki clan head, Naruto, your presence will be required." Tsunade snapped her fingers once more and waited for 3 more Anbu to walk alongside them before giving them orders. With that one straightforward command, the Anbu set out. "I want you 3 to gather the council together. It's time to decide the Uchiha's fate. Council rooms. A little while later. In the council chambers, Naruto waited calmly for the other members of the council to arrive while seated in his assigned chair. The civilian council was taking their sweet time getting there, but the majority of the clan heads had already arrived. He couldn't help frowning as he gazed down at Sasuke. The Uchiha was making a weak attempt to free himself from his bonds. But he couldn't use his Sharingan to free himself, and he couldn't break his bonds without access to his chakra. He sighed, deciding to ignore him for the moment and concentrate on the meeting that would start as soon as the other members of the council arrived and sat down. The civilian council eventually showed up and sat down after a little while. Naruto was unable to contain his disbelief as he looked at them. They must have taken a long time to get here because they truly believe they are important, conceited jerks. As you can see, Sasuke Uchiha has been apprehended and brought back to the village. Now that we're all finally here, Tsunade said, glaring at the bystanders. Tsunade clenched her jaw and slammed her fist down on the table in front of her as the civilian council started applauding and cheering there, Sasuke-sama. The civilians wore matching smiles, but she screamed, "Shut the hell up!" to scare them into silence. On Team Yamato's last mission, they encountered Orochimaru and his right hand, Kabuto Yakushi. Kabuto was captured as well and is currently under interrogation as we speak, she said. She went on talking before anyone could cut her off. Team Yamato followed Orochimaru back to his hideout where not only did they defeat and capture Sasuke Uchiha, but they slew Orochimaru as well. Hiashi was the first to speak, his eyes wide with shock at this. Then Tsunade brought Orochimaru's head to the room. "I'm sorry Hokage-sama, but I find that a little hard to believe. How could they have possibly?" He started to ask. It goes without saying that this effectively put a stop to Hiyashi's protests. Tsunade grinned and said, "No more queries or grievances about Team Yamato's skill. Good. Now, the reason I have called this meeting is to decide what to do about Sasuke Uchiha. We need a punishment that will fit his crimes." The civilian council erupted before she could say another word. Before speaking up on their behalf, one of the members finally silenced the others. "Hokage-sama, surely you can't be serious. Sasuke-sama was a loyal shinobi of Konoha before Orochimaru's men kidnapped him and took him away. Surely he can't be held accountable for that." At this, Naruto scoffed. "Sasuke Uchiha is a criminal. On that retrieval mission 3 years ago, when I attempted to bring him back to Konoha, he attempted to murder me. Sasuke was leaving of his own accord. His goal was to join Orochimaru and gain the power needed to kill his brother one day. Sasuke was never loyal to Konoha, only to himself." The same man yelled back, "Quiet demon. Nobody was asking you," but was nearly impaled by a huge spear of ice that sprang down from the ceiling, causing him to go wide-eyed and urinate in horror. Meru lowered her hand, shook her head in disgust, and glared at the civilian council. "Bastards. Don't you dare talk to Naruto that way. Keep it up and you'll experience firsthand the kinds of horrors I can inflict upon you," she yelled. To get everyone's attention, Tsunade clapped her hands together. She glared at the civilians and said, "I have to agree. Keep your mouths shut if you know what's good for you. Sasuke is a criminal. He betrayed the village of Konoha and attempted to murder one of our own when he tried to stop Sasuke from leaving. For these crimes, he must be punished. Now, I am open to suggestions. Personally, I'd prefer to just execute him, but I'm giving you all a say in what should be done about him." Tsunade raised her hand to silence the civilian council as they appeared to be about to protest once more. "No, Sasuke will not go free. He wasn't manipulated in any way. I don't know how many times you idiots need to hear that before it gets through to your tiny, pea-sized brains. Now, unless you idiots can come up with a suitable punishment for him, I recommend you shut your traps." With furious frowns on their faces, the civilian council fell silent, and Naruto couldn't help but smirk. He looked down at Sasuke and started talking. He asked, "Hokage-sama, if I may." Tsunade inquired inquisitively, "You may, Naruto-kun. Do you have a suggestion?" He began to smile sadistically as he watched Sasuke struggle, saying, "I do. I know you would prefer to execute him and be done with it, but personally, I think that's far too light a punishment for him. I recommend permanently sealing away his chakra and forcing him to live life as a civilian, knowing he'll never be able to exact his revenge upon Itachi. On top of that, I recommend removing his eyes and giving them to someone more worthy of them, as once his chakra is sealed, they will no longer be of any use to Sasuke. Wouldn't you agree, Hokage-sama?" You bastard. Itachi deserves to pay for what he's done. You can't take this away from me, snarled Sasuke in response. Naruto turned to face the Hokage, grinning broadly, and gestured down at Sasuke. I know another of his dreams was to restore his clan. I'd recommend performing a vasectomy to render him sterile. That way he can never achieve either of his dreams. I think that sounds like quite the agreeable punishment, wouldn't you, Hokage-sama? Tsunade nodded her head and grinned at this. I find that punishment to be quite agreeable indeed, Naruto-kun. Does anyone have anything to add, or shall we go ahead with this punishment? Before he spoke, Shikaku Nara scratched at his chin and yawned. It would be a shame to let the Uchiha clan die out permanently, Hokage-sama. So, while I agree with the punishment Naruto has suggested, I would recommend extracting a suitable amount of sperm from Sasuke before you perform the procedure to render him sterile. At least that way we can rebuild the Uchiha clan and nurture them from a young age to be better than any of the previous Uchiha were. And, this way, Sasuke will have no influence over them, as, despite being his sperm, they will not be his children, and therefore he has no say in how they are raised. So, in essence, Sasuke won't be restoring the Uchiha clan like he dreamed of doing, but we'll be restoring them ourselves and helping guide them to become better people than any of the previous Uchiha could ever have been. All right, I can agree to that. What do the rest of you think? Does the punishment chosen match the crime? The Godime said, surveying the crowd. After giving Sasuke a brief glance, the civilian council started debating the penalty among themselves. A moment later, the same spokesperson started talking. We can agree to this decision, so long as sperm is, indeed, extracted. In fact, we'd even be willing to put forth our daughters as potential child-bearers for the new Uchiha clan. He replied with a lustful grin. As she had already anticipated from them, Tsunade sighed and shook her head. She turned to the clan heads and waited for their response, putting that specific issue aside for the time being. It was Hiyashi who spoke first. I can agree with this punishment, though I'd prefer not seeing any more Uchihas brought to life. Still, I can agree with Shikaku's assessment and understand where he's coming from. So you have my vote, Hokage-sama. The next to speak was Choza. You have my vote as well. The punishment indeed fits the crime. However, may I ask who you plan to give Sasuke's eyes to after they are extracted? Tsunade shook her head and scowled at this. Since she already knew who she wanted to give Sasuke's eyes to, she lied and said, I can think of a few people worthy of such a gift, but I'm currently undecided. Choza nodded in agreement, then fell silent and awaited the votes of his fellow clan leaders. Then came Inoichi. You have my vote. I'm sure Ino-chan won't be very happy with what we're doing to Sasuke, but... With a sigh, the voluptuous Godime Hokage shook her head. You're thinking of allowing her to become pregnant using some of Sasuke's sperm, aren't you? Inoichi sighed and shook his head, shuddering in disgust at the thought. I just don't know, Hokage-sama. I want my little girl to be happy, but at the same time, it just wouldn't feel right to me. So I'm at war with myself right now. He grumbled. Tsunade smiled sympathetically at him and nodded in comprehension. I understand. It's a hard choice and not one to be made right here, right now. Take your time and speak with your family about this, Inoichi. Then, and only then, should you come to a decision regarding such a thing, she told him. After giving a grateful nod, Inoichi turned to face Sume and Shibi, who had not yet cast their ballots. Sume shook her head in disgust as she glanced down at Sasuke. I hate the idea of allowing the Uchiha clan to come back, but if we can raise them right, then hell, you have my vote. Before he spoke, Shibi adjusted his glasses. My vote is yours as well, Hokage-sama. Sasuke has brought this on himself, and it only makes sense to do what must be done for the good of the village as a whole. Tsunade looked down at Sasuke and gave him a devilish grin while nodding in comprehension. Fine then, as the Godime Hokage of Konohagakure, I declare Sasuke's punishment set. Sasuke, your chakra will be sealed and your eyes removed to be transplanted into someone else of my choosing. Furthermore, your sperm will be extracted and kept in our sperm bank before you are given a vasectomy to prevent you from ever restoring your clan as you had dreamed. Anbu, take him away. Sasuke started to yell, you'll all die for this. Do you hear me? I'll find a way to make you all suffer. Nobody keeps me from my goals. Nobody. As the Anbu materialized, Tsunade couldn't help but shake her head when the Anbu disappeared with Sasuke. She looked around at everyone and remarked, what a deranged little boy. Does anyone have any further business we need to discuss? Or can we call it a day? She grinned and clapped her hands together when no one spoke. She led Naruto, Yamato, and their teammates back to her office after saying, "Then I declare this meeting over. You're all free to leave. Naruto-kun, I want you and your team to follow me. We have something to discuss." When they returned to Tsunade's office, she turned on the silencing seals and gave the group of 10 a serious look. "I asked you to come here because I wanted to discuss a few things. The first of which is this. Sakura, how would you feel if I asked you to be the one to use Sasuke's Sharingan?" Sakura pointed at herself in surprise and blinked at this. She asked uncertainly, "Emmi Tsunade Shisho. But, why? Wouldn't it be better if they went to Naruto-kun?" At this, Naruto scowled and shook his head. "While the Sharingan would be useful in combat, there's a problem. I'd love to be able to use the Sharingan to help suppress the Kyuubi if it ever started trying to take me over again. But, there's a chance that the Kyuubi could influence the Sharingan in some way if they were to be implanted in me. He could do any number of things, even blind me probably, and that wouldn't be good for anyone. If they went to you, however." Riku slowly nodded in comprehension after realizing where this was going. "I get it. If Sakura gets the Sharingan, she could use them to suppress the Kyuubi if Naruto ever starts going out of control. After all, he can control up to 4 tails, but after that, not so much," she replied with nervous laughter. "It wasn't easy bringing him back when he went 5 tails that one time, was it, girls?" Everyone who had accompanied Naruto on the training trip nodded together. Young, shivering slightly from the memory of that incident, remarked, "That was a scary day. Luckily we were able to beat Naruto down enough for Jiraiya to slap a bunch of seals on him and force him out of the transformation." Still scary. Not liking that Jiraiya hadn't told her about that specific incident, Tsunade scowled at this information. But she let out a sigh and returned her attention to Sakura. "So Sakura, what is your answer? Will you accept the Sharingan?" Sakura scowled at this and considered her next words for a long time. She turned to face her sensei and the other members of her team, who all gave her comforting smiles. With a breathy sigh, she turned back to her master and gave him a single nod. "I will. If it means I'll become stronger and I can help Naruto-kun in any way, then I'll do it." "Great. I'll let you know when the transplant is time. For now." Tsunade turned to Naruto and scowled for a moment, considering what she was going to give him instructions to do. At last, she shook her head and let out a deep sigh. "Naruto, I think it's time for you to attempt and link up with one of your girlfriend's worlds. I would personally recommend attempting to connect to Tawa's world first, as due to that world's knowledge of time magic, it might prove beneficial for you. Then again, the choice is yours alone. I can only offer you my advice." Naruto was about to object to Tsunade's request, his eyes widening, but Tsunade silenced him with a hand gesture. "Before you try and argue with me, saying you aren't ready yet or you don't think you can do it, I want you to listen to me. First of all, this isn't a request, it's an order. As your Hokage, I'm commanding you to make the attempt," she continued. "But I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have complete faith in you, Naruto-kun. I believe you'll succeed. All you need to do is believe in yourself and your ability to keep your magic under control. It is my belief that you will succeed in this. So, do you trust me?" After a long moment of staring at Tsunade in awe, Naruto smiled and nodded his head. With distinction, he said, "Understood, Tsunade-sama. Thank you for your faith in me. I promise I won't let you down." "Good. I'm glad to hear it. I want to see this firsthand, so if you'll follow me, I'll take you to the Hokage's personal training ground. We'll be alone there and it seems like the perfect place to attempt this," she clarified. "And just in case we end up sucked into their world, I've already ordered Jiraiya to look after the village for me in my place," she grinned. The curvaceous Godime Hokage turned off the silencing seals and started guiding the sizable group to her private training area. The Hokage's private training area. Naruto stood apart from Tsunade and his teammates, gazing up at the sky. He took a deep breath, gazed forward, and then raised his hand and pointed it palm flat in front of him after a moment of simply soaking in nature and letting it wash over him. As he started to charge his magic, he muttered to himself, "All right. Here goes nothing." Naruto concentrated on his magic and the power he possessed once he felt he had a firm hold on it. Then he let it loose, rupturing a hole in space directly in front of him. Naruto concentrated on the hole in space and expanded it until it was large enough for humans to pass through. In order to prevent the hole from dispelling itself, he finally used his magic to anchor it there. After he was done, He collapsed on his butt and started to breathe heavily due to exhaustion. Tsunade approached the hole and gave it a cautious look as Naruto's group hurried to his side. She turned to face her favorite knucklehead and said, "Well, it looks stable enough. Are you sure you connected to the right world, Naruto-kun?" Naruto nodded his head as he stood up with Meru and his fiancée's assistance. "Oh yeah, it's definitely connected to Tawa's world. I could feel it when I made the connection. Just gimme a moment to recover and I'll be ready to go." In response, Tsunade nodded and briefly inserted her hand through the hole to test the sensation. She blinked bewilderedly as a cool breeze touched her hand. "Strange. I didn't anticipate that at all. However, I'm not sure how I anticipated it to feel. Maybe this breeze is coming from the wormhole's opposite side," she wondered inquisitively. With a hopeful expression, Tawa took a step forward. She smiled brightly and said, I can finally see Toki and the others again. Enda, Reiho, Weedy, Grandma. I'll get to see you all again." Naruto put an arm around his beautiful blonde girlfriend's waist and held her close while grinning at her. "That's why we're going through it now. We're going to see how your friends and family are, Tawa-chan. Tsunade-sama, are you coming with us, or are you staying here?" he asked, turning to Tsunade. With a sigh, the curvaceous blonde Hokage shook her head no. Before she developed a serious expression, she said, "I'm afraid I'm staying here, Naruto-kun. I was only here to make sure it worked and to tend to anyone that might have been injured had it failed. Team Yamato, here are your new orders. Journey through this wormhole and ensure that Toki Harem and her friends are well. Should anything go wrong or there turns out to be trouble in that world, you have my permission to deal with it as needed. When you return, I want a full report on what you saw and experienced in that world. I want to know if it's a world we can count on for trade and a truly beneficial partnership between us. Now go." With a nod of comprehension, Team Yamato faced the wormhole and proceeded to enter it one by one until Tsunade was the only person remaining in the clearing. In the hopes that nothing would go wrong on the other side, she said, "Good luck. All of you." Plains of wind. As they emerged from the wormhole, they looked around and discovered that they were in a vast, open field. The majority of the group, of course, didn't know where they were, so they looked to Tawa to see if she knew. Tawa clarified, "We're on the wind plains, just east of Kamza. Judging from our position, I'd say we're near the eastern end of the plains. We need to head west if we want to get to Kamza." The group nodded in agreement and continued on their long journey through the wind plains to Kamza, the royal capital. The group couldn't help but notice the different animals that roamed the plains as they traveled across them. As some of the creatures started to approach the group, Naruto questioned, "Are those robots?" Tawa nodded her head and sighed as she prepared her weapon. The former princess hurried forward to confront their adversaries, saying, "Yes, those are robots, Naruto. They tend to roam these plains. They're no threat to us though, so just deal with them as you would any other enemy and let's be on our way. I want to see Toki and the others as soon as possible." Yamato sighed and gestured toward the others. He gave the order, "Well, you heard the girl. Let's get a move on team." Before everyone joined the battle. Kamza. A few hours later. When the team eventually reached Kamza, it was well into the evening. They could tell by looking around that the city was in a serious mood. Unavoidably, Tawa stepped forward a few paces and peered around with wide, anxious eyes. "Something's not right. Everyone is usually so full of cheer whenever I came into the city. But something's happened," she said, turning back to Naruto and the others. At this, Yamato scowled and cast a questioning glance around before nodding to himself. "Tawa, do you think you could take us to meet your friends? Hopefully one of them will know what's happened." With a nod, Tawa signaled her team to follow her. With a venomous tone, she spat out Zack's name and said, "I'll take you guys to my old house that I used to live in with Toki and Zack. The home of Toki, Tawa." They could hear voices coming from inside the house when they first arrived. "It's them. My friends are inside," Tawa told the others after paying close attention and quickly identifying the voices. Yamato put his hand on Tawa's and shook his head as she attempted to open the door. "Shish, let's listen first and see what information we can get before we rush on in there. After all." At this, Naruto sighed and spoke up. Tawa was shocked when he explained, "You told us before that Mobius wiped their memories of you. They wouldn't recognize you." The blonde with the whiskers approached her after noticing her dejected expression and gave her a tight hug. He leaned in and planted a gentle, tender kiss on her lips after tilting her head up with his finger. Before the group started to listen in, Tawa gave Naruto a grateful smile as they parted ways. Reiho's voice could be heard saying, "It's been 3 weeks already. I'm really beginning to worry about her." Enda's voice could be heard adding, "I know. Who'da thought that would happen, huh guys? I feel so sorry for her. To think Zack would go and do such a thing behind her back. I didn't think he was that kind of guy." Weedy was heard saying. Tawa was shocked to hear Makemona's voice say, "I dunno, he seemed like a big flirt to me. A flirt and a pervert. He did try to peek on us when we were in the hot springs that one day. I know, I still can't believe Toki actually married that pigweed. Still, I didn't think he was the type to go and do that to her." Reiho continued. "Hey guys, my little fairy friend says there are people at the door. Should we let them in?" heard Weedy say. Tawa palmed her face after her eyes widened. She looked at Yamato to see if he had any clever ideas and said, "Stupid. I forgot that Weedy has a fairy friend looking over her. Well, it looks like we've been found out. What now, Captain?" With a sigh, Yamato observed the door being opened. An angry brunette with a blue hat on her head was standing there. He started to say something, but Reiho was quicker than him. "Who are you and why were you spying on us?" Yamato sighed once more and briefly glanced at Tawa before turning back to face Reiho. "Hello, my name is Yamato. These are my friends. We were hoping we could ask you for some information." Tawa shook her head and sighed. "Reiho," she started, unexpectedly introducing herself. "My name is Tawa. You and I used to be friends, but I doubt you and the others remember me anymore." Enda appeared behind Reiho with a radiant smile. "Hey, that's the name of Toki's daughter. What are the odds of that, huh Reiho?" Unable to comprehend what she had just heard, Tawa blinked and stared at Enda for a while. She couldn't help but smile when her brain finally reset itself. "Toki named her daughter after me." Unable to comprehend what she was hearing, Reiho cried out, Whoa, hold up. What do you mean she named her daughter after you? And since when were we friends? I don't get this at all." Weedy's voice was heard saying, "Guys, she's telling the truth. My little fairy friend said that we should listen to what she has to say. So please, let them in so we can have this discussion inside." With a sigh, Reiho crossed her arms over her chest and gave them a brief dagger-like stare. Weedy finally moved aside and let the team enter the house when she could be heard saying, "Please Reiho. Don't be so stubborn about this." Tawa took seats wherever she could, turned to face her old friends, and grinned broadly at the chance to see them all again. The first thing that came to mind when she looked at Weedy was, "Thank you, Weedy, for believing me." Weedy shook her head and grinned. "Not at all Tawa. That is your name, correct?" The blonde former princess nodded her head and grinned. Toki's friends were shocked when she revealed, "Yes. My name is Tawa, and I used to live inside of Toki as a part of her. We were two separate people sharing the same body. I know it may be hard to believe, but if you'll allow me to explain my story, you'll understand, I promise." Makamona appeared doubtful, but after a while she sighed and gave a head nod. "Well, what the heck? I'm down for a little storytime session. How about you Reiho?" After giving it some serious thought, Reiho finally gave in and said, "Fine. I guess I'll hear you out, but only because Weedy seems to trust you." Enda jumped giddy up and down on her seat and giggled. "Ooh, story time. I can't wait." Tawa nodded her head and giggled at that. "As I said before, Toki and I used to share the same body. We were two souls trapped within the same body, and we could freely switch control of that body between the two of us," she said. "Well, on the day of our wedding to Zack, something terrible happened right before we could kiss and seal the deal, so to speak." Tawa shook her head, letting out a deep sigh at this. Toki used her time magic to travel back in time 6 months to change things so that her future with Zack would be saved after he was killed by assassins. However, Tawa sighed once more, shook her head, and closed her eyes as she went on. She looked directly at Reiho and said, "After coming back from the past and attempting to have our wedding again, this time, Reiho attacked us." At this, Reiho crossed her arms over her chest and scowled. "This story is sounding more and more ludicrous every second. There's no way I would have ever attacked Toki like that." In the negative, Tawa shook her head and grinned. "No, you wouldn't have. But you were possessed by something at the time. Anyways, once more Toki traveled into the past to set things right, this time going back 3 months. But after that, the wedding was interrupted by Makamona, who had gone mad with the power of the something four. At this, Mekamona crossed her arms beneath her bust and scowled. Why would I go and do something like that? Toki's always been kind to me. Tawa scowled as she looked down at the table in front of her and shook her head once more. Mekamona, you were always so lonely back then. You wanted to use the power of the something four to get a boyfriend, and the thought of Toki and Zack getting married and being happy together when you couldn't even get a boyfriend bothered you something fierce. Enda interrupted the purple-haired woman before she could raise any more objections. You have to admit, Mekamona, Tawa here has a point. A few years ago you were a really lonely person. But now you have us. Mekamona let out a sigh and gave a sympathetic nod. I suppose I can see that. Please, go on, Tawa. With a smile, Tawa said, thank you, Mekamona. Anyways, we traveled back 1 month in time to try and put a stop to what was happening. When we met our grandmother, she told us that we were trapped in something called the Mobius Loop. In order to break it, we needed to get our hands on the something four. Mekamona, with your help we were able to enter the Four Gardens and collect the something four from their guardians. However, shortly after collecting the last of the something four, you showed up and stole them from us, going mad with their power. You attacked us and we were forced to fight you to save you from yourself as well as to get the something four back. Sadly, the something four were lost after the fight. Mekamona rubbed her arm and winced at this. Sorry for that. It sounds like I really caused you some grief. Tawa shook her head and grinned at her. Don't worry about it, Mekamona. You four created your own something four for Toki and I to use, and it was with the power of the something four you four created for us that we were able to finally face the one that had been causing us all that grief, Mobius. Enda asked inquisitively, wait, Mobius? As in the Mobius loop? Tawa stated, the very same. We chased Mobius back through time and eventually ended up going back to a full year before the wedding through our battles with her. What we didn't know at the time, though, was the fact that the more time passed and the more we fought against Mobius, the more our memories began to fade until we couldn't remember any of the adventures we had been on at all or any of the special moments we shared with Zack and you four. Weedy frowned when she heard this and remarked, how sad. I assume, though, that something changed. Tawa gave a nod. The blonde ex-princess looked back down at the table and started to tinker with her fingers. It turned out that a promise Toki and I had made when we were children was the cause of the Mobius loop to begin with. So Grandma went back in time to prevent us from making that promise. However, one of us would have to disappear. The four friends in the group gasped at that, and their faces lit up with realization. When Tawa saw this, he gave one nod. We left the decision up to Zack. And he chose Toki over me. I ended up disappearing towards the end of the battle, leaving only Toki and Zack to finish the fight. But that's so sad. That's like totally unfair, was Enda's angry cry, accompanied by a cute pout. I have to agree, that doesn't sound very fair to you at all, especially if you were just as in love with that musk thistle as Toki was. Reiho responded. Tawa shook her head and sighed. It's fine. Besides, Toki and Zack defeated Mobius for me and they got to have their wedding. So, it all worked out in the end, she replied. But I was stuck in an endless void with Mobius as my only companion. Needless to say, I wasn't pleased about that. Who would be if you were trapped with the very being that took away your chance at happiness? I know I'd go insane if it were me, Mekamona replied. The pretty blonde shook her head and giggled. It, surprisingly, wasn't all bad. Mobius allowed me to watch the wedding between Toki and Zack when it finally happened. But, more than that, Mobius opened my eyes to the kind of pervert Zack really was. I learned quite a bit about Zack that still pisses me off to this day when I think about it. Still, so long as Toki was happy with him, that's what really mattered to me. I don't think he's right for her though, but that's just my opinion. Reiho remarked, not just yours anymore. We all feel the same way now about that dog fennel. Yeah, cried Enda, he's hurt Toki and we're all pretty mad about that. Tawa stared at the four of them in disbelief as her eyes widened in horror at this. Panicked. He hurt Toki. How? When? Is she okay? She exclaimed. With a frown, Weedy reached across the table and grasped Tawa's hand. Calm yourself, Tawa. Toki's okay. She's not hurt physically. Zack would never raise a hand to her like that. But Mekamona made the bold decision to speak up when Weedy turned away from Tawa, clearly unable to continue. The bastard cheated on her and she found out about it just recently. Zach's acting like nothing's wrong, but Toki. We haven't seen or heard from her in a while. She's locked herself in her room at the castle and hasn't come out for 3 weeks now. It's lucky that her servants think to bring her something to eat and drink for each meal of the day, or she'd have probably died in there. She said gravely, causing her peers to growl at her for saying what she did. He cheated on her. I knew he was a lecherous pervert, but I didn't think he'd go that far. Tawa was fuming. I'll murder that rotten bastard for hurting Toki like this. At this point, Yamato moved forward to try to soothe Tawa by putting a hand on her shoulder. Calm yourself, Tawa. Yamato chose to pose a question after glancing at her friends. I'm curious, how many years has it been since the wedding took place? Despite blinking at the unexpected question, Reiho responded. It's been 4 years since the wedding. Their daughter is turning 3 in a couple of days. Why do you ask? Yamato glanced at Tawa and nodded his head. It would seem time passes by just a little quicker here than it does in the world we just came from. He continued. My best guess is that Zach, after spending that long with Toki, got tired of sampling the same fruit all the time and wanted something a little more from his life. Hence why he started this affair. How long has it been going on? Or was it just a one-time thing? Weedy shook her head and scowled. No, it's not a one-time thing. Zach's been seeing 2 other women, both of whom are rich and beautiful. And considering Zach's our king now, well. Yamato gave another nod. Zach lavishes them with expensive gifts and they don't tell a soul. Only problem is, one of them did let it slip and now Toki's suffering for it. Bingo. You're pretty smart. Wait, we never got your names. Reiho said, gesturing to the other passengers. Who are all you people? Yamato put a hand to his chest and bowed to the group of friends, letting out another sigh. Upon introducing himself, he said, my name is Yamato. My friends are Naruto Uzumaki, Temari, Sakura Haruno, Meru, Riku, Gage, Yang Xiaolong, and Blake Belladonna. Each member of his team replied with a wave or a greeting. Naruto ended up saving Tawa from her lonely life in the void she was in with Mobius. It was an accident, but he pulled Tawa from that void and into the world that Sakura, Temari, Naruto, and myself are from. You see, he wields a powerful magic, capable of opening holes in space and time. As a result of this, he's ended up connecting to other worlds and pulling people from those worlds into our own. This caused Naruto to sigh and rub the back of his head. He frowned and remarked, it's not like I do it on purpose. You try controlling magic that powerful. It's not easy, Yamato-sensei. Let me guess, Naruto's magic is the reason you were able to come back here, Tawa? Reiho inquired. Tawa gave a nod. Yes, it took a few years, but I'm finally back home. I'm not here to stay, however, she replied. Enda asked, visibly agitated. What? Why not? This is your home, isn't it, Tawa? Kamza will always be my first home and a place I would love to come back to whenever possible. But my new home is with Naruto. I'm going to be one of his brides someday soon and I want to start a family with him. So my place is in his world now. Tawa clarified. Reiho narrowed her eyes as soon as she heard Tawa say something. You just said one of his brides. Don't tell me he's a pervert too. Tawa smiled at her dear friend and shook her head in the negative. No, Reiho. Naruto is a wonderful person. It's just, most of the girls you see here, we fell in love with him and we all wanted to be with him. Riku got to him first and we were about to give up on him, boo it. Naruto rubbed the back of his head agitatedly and sighed. You see, in my world we've got these things called clans. I'm a member of the Uzumaki clan. In fact, I'm probably one of, if not the last members of my clan. When a clan like mine becomes endangered like that, the village council can enact something called the CRA, or Clan Restoration Act, in an attempt to revive that clan. What this entails is, Weedy interrupted Naruto before he could finish, speculating, marrying multiple wives. You have to marry multiple wives and have children with each of them, don't you? She asked. The blonde with the whiskers gave her a charming smile and nodded. He said, bingo, you're pretty smart, Weedy-chan. With admiration. I'll be honest here, I didn't ask to be put in the CRA. I mean, who would? Well, besides a guy like Jiraiya-sensei anyways. But, if it means I get to be happy with my girls, then I can't complain. At this, Reiho crossed her arms over her chest and scowled. It still sounds a little fishy to me. But, if it means you're all happy together. Riku interrupted, glaring at Reiho as though she dared to criticize them and their arrangement, saying, "We are. Naru makes us all really happy. So don't complain, Reiho." The brunette raised her hands in a conciliatory gesture and waved them. Okay, I may not understand it, but if you're all happy sharing the same guy, I can't complain. Especially if it makes Tawa happy. Tawa grinned gratefully. Sincerely, she said, "Thank you, Reiho. Now, does anyone know where Grandma is? If we can find her, I'm sure she can help us talk to Toki." "Ooh, I know. She's probably down at Ricardo's bakery enjoying one of his cakes at this time of day," Enda said, raising her hand in the air. At this, Tawa blinked in surprise and then shivered in disgust. How can anyone enjoy those things? Ricardo's cakes were just awful. Makamona shook her head and blinked at this. Well, they might have been that way in the time you came from, but his cakes are world-renowned in this timeline. They are just that good. The former princess said, "I see. I have to admit that I'm happy for the guy, despite how weird he can be." Weedy nodded her head in agreement and giggled. Ricardo is a pretty weird guy. That hasn't changed about him. To get their attention, Yamato clapped his hands together. Eager to get this self-appointed mission started, he said, "Okay then. It seems our plan is set. Let's go find your grandma, Tawa, and enlist her help in aiding Toki Harem." After all, they had already caught up and talked for a sufficient amount of time. It was time to take action. The bakery of Ricardo. As soon as they arrived at the bakery, they noticed an old woman in red sitting at one of the outdoor tables, savoring some enticing-looking pastries. "Grandma, do you remember me?" Tawa asked hopefully as she walked up to her. Anna stopped, her shocked eyes widening. That voice was familiar to her. A radiant smile appeared on her face as she turned to face the one who had spoken to her. She got up to give Tawa a firm hug and exclaimed, "Tawa, I never thought I'd see you again. Oh dear, how have you been?" As Tawa held her grandmother, she couldn't help but cry a little. "I've missed you, Grandma. I'm so happy to see you again." As she caressed Tawa's long, blonde hair, Anna held her close to her. "Sweetheart, sit down and tell me where you've been. You must have experienced so much since I last saw you." Grinning, the blonde former princess took a seat beside her grandmother and waited for the others to follow suit. There weren't enough chairs around the table where Anna was sitting, so many of them had to take chairs from the other tables. When everyone was seated, Anna turned to face Tawa. She inquired inquisitively, "So Tawa, what have you been up to these last 5 years, Tawa rubbed the back of her head and sighed. "I spent the first year trapped in an endless void with Mobius. It was not a fun time for me. However, Mobius did open my eyes about Zack and his perverted nature, so I have to thank her for that." Anna grimaced at Tawa's plight. Being trapped with Mobius couldn't have been very fun. "But you're free now. Tell me more." Well, Tawa turned to face Naruto and took his hand, squeezing it lightly. She turned back to her grandmother and gave her a joyful smile. "Naruto ended up opening a wormhole right into the void I was in and pulled me through it. Mobius kind of gave me a push though." "Of course she did. You wouldn't willingly jump through a wormhole knowing the risks that come with doing so," Anna replied. "After all, a wormhole such as that could lead anywhere, even linked to other worlds or dimensions. Such things are incredibly dangerous. It would take someone truly skilled in space and time magic to create a stable wormhole and connect it to a specific location." After nodding, Tawa gently squeezed Naruto's hand. It turns out that Naruto accidentally opened the wormhole during an emotional breakdown he was having. But it led to my meeting him and I'm grateful for that. As Anna and Naruto kissed each other, Anna couldn't help but smile at Tawa. "I see, so you've moved on from Zack. I'm happy for that, especially now, after what has happened with Toki." Tawa chose to pick up where she left off, nodding her head in comprehension. "Anyways, I decided to train Naruto in the use of his time and space magic to the best of my ability. He made for a great student, but there have been a few mishaps," she said, then cracked up. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and let out a sigh. "Hey, I'm still getting the hang of my magic. Give me a break." Tawa patted Naruto's hand after she had stopped laughing and turned back to her grandmother. "I've spent 2 years of my life there with Naruto and my new friends. I've met some amazing people too, including the Toads of MT. Mayoboku and the Hokage, a woman by the name of Tsunade Senju. But there is significantly more danger there than there is in this world. On top of that, A lot of the people of Naruto's home village of Konohagakure hate him for something beyond his control. So while I do love it there are things that worry me as well. Anna glanced briefly at Naruto before turning back to Tawa. I see. That strange power inside of him that I sense, that dark, vile energy, that's why they hate him, isn't it, Tawa? At this, everyone's eyes widened in surprise. While Reiho, Enda, Weedy, and Makimona were taken aback to learn that their new friend was harboring something seemingly sinister, Team Yamato was astounded that she could sense the Kyuubi within Naruto. Curious, Yamato asked, how is it you can sense the Kyuubi? After giggling a little, the old woman gestured to Naruto's abdomen. I'm afraid it's impossible to hide something that powerful from me. What's concerning to me is that an energy that dark and foul is far too dangerous to use. Tell me, Naruto, when you've used this energy in the past, has it harmed you? Naruto let out a deep sigh and nodded slowly. He shuddered at this point, recalling how agonizing the few times he had previously entered a four-tailed state had been. Yes, the Kyuubi's chakra is corrosive in nature. It damages me when I try to use it, and when I enter my four-tailed state, he said. Anna let out a sigh and nodded. I suspected as much. We'll have to talk more about this Kyuubi later. Right now, I believe you were telling me about your time away, Tawa. As Tawa continued to tell her grandmother about her time away from her world, Naruto wondered what Anna was thinking about the Kyuubi. Upon our return to Konoha, we were all put on a team together and became members of Konoha's military force. The majority of people there are ninjas, grandma. They're able to use some amazing techniques ranging from shooting fireballs from their mouths to summoning gigantic creatures. She exclaimed with an air of excitement. Tawa quickly pulled herself together and went on. Anyways, after that, we went and saved the leader of another village from these evil people called the Akatsuki. I fought a man named Sasori then. He was a puppet master, able to use puppets he created to do battle. We beat him, of course, but that was one of the most intense fights I've ever been in. She stated with a small grin on her face. What? She cherished the excitement of combat. The sparkle in Tawa's eyes made Anna laugh uncontrollably. You still enjoy a good battle, don't you, Tawa? I'm glad to see you haven't changed too much, sweetheart. Even though Tawa blushed in shame, she persisted. Immediately after that mission, we were sent on another to go and capture an enemy spy that used to work for Sasori. When we got to the Tenchi Bridge, we found out that the spy was actually Kabuto Yakushi, Orochimaru's right-hand man. His master, Orochimaru, also appeared and a fight broke out. She continued. I assume you managed to not only win the fight, but capture the spy as well. Tawa's grandmother asked her granddaughter with a smile. The blonde former princess grinned as she nodded. She tried to brag about her boyfriend to her grandmother by saying, yes. But Orochimaru unleashed a massive attack that very well could have killed us. Naruto proved that my lessons with him weren't wasted, however, and used his time magic to save us. The compliment made Naruto flush, but he shook his head. It wasn't just me. You took care of the rest of the snakes he summoned. You deserve just as much credit, Tawa-chan. At this, Anna grinned and glanced between them. Hey, you two are cute together. Anyways, what happened next? Tawa kissed her boyfriend's cheek, then looked into Anna's eyes and told her story again. After pursuing Orochimaru to his hiding place and eliminating him, we apprehended Sasuke Uchiha, a traitor to Konohagakure. Tawa scowled at Naruto at this point. A year before I appeared in his world, Sasuke nearly killed Naruto. So I'm glad things went differently this time. Naruto gives Tawa a comforting squeeze on the hand. Don't worry, Tawa-chan, I'm not going to die anytime soon. I still have to become Hokage and start a family with you lovely ladies after all. He smiled. Anna furrowed her brow and scowled as she glanced around at all the unfamiliar women. Tawa, you're in a polygamous relationship. Tawa replied with a nod. Yes, but we're all very happy together, Grandma. We all fell in love with the same wonderful man and we couldn't be happier. Anna grinned at her granddaughter and nodded her head in comprehension. I'm glad to hear that. So long as you're happy, Tawa, that's all that matters to me. Now, what else have you been up to? Well, after returning to Konoha with our targets, we had to go to a council meeting to decide Sasuke's fate. I won't go into details, but let's just say the punishment more than fits the crime. Tawa laughed as she explained. After that, Tsunade ordered Naruto to try and open a portal to this world. And now, here we are. I assume she sought you four out first. The elderly woman asked, turning from Tawa to her old friends. When Reiho and the others nodded, Anna sighed and turned back to Tawa. What have they told you, Tawa? Tawa clenched her fists in a, Zack's been cheating on Toki. They also told me that Toki hasn't left her room in 3 weeks. I think the only good piece of news they had for me was that they have a daughter that they named after me. Anna gave a sorrowful nod. She sighed and shook her head, saying, yes. When Toki caught Zack in the act, they had a huge fight. He broke her heart, Tawa. And yet, Zack acts like nothing's wrong. Kamza hasn't been the same since Toki secluded herself away. She lit up people's lives, and now that she's secluding herself, the people are feeling almost as depressed as she is. At this point, Naruto broke off their conversation. That's why we came to you, ma'am. We were hoping you could help us meet with Toki. We're hoping that we can break her out of her funk and make things right again. Anna glanced between Tawa and her boyfriend, nodded her head in comprehension, and then let out a sigh. All right, I'll take you to see her. Just know that even if you manage to help Toki, you'll still need to do something about Zack. Tawa gave a head nod. Of course, he'll be lucky if I allow him to live after hurting Toki like this. She grumbled. Anna shook her head and sighed. I'm hoping you can find a nonviolent solution to this, but if he pushes you too far, I understand if you decide to get violent with him. After all, he's kind of brought it on himself. Just promise me you won't take it too far. After scowling, the blonde noblewoman finally gave in to her grandmother's demand. I promise, Grandma, I won't kill him, but that doesn't mean I won't neuter the jerk. Tao's grandmother nodded in agreement, laughing quietly. She got up and started to lead the group towards the castle after saying, that's all I can ask from you, sweetie. Now, let's get going. It's time to get Toki some much-needed help. Tawa took Naruto's hand and squeezed it firmly for support as they walked. Toki, don't worry, we're here to assist you. After we're done, you won't have to endure any more pain.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.